And welcome into Hoopsville, everybody. On this Monday, the brackets are out, and we are ready for some NCAA tournaments. If you got any questions, tweet us at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us, hoopsville at d3sports.com. You can also join us on our live simulcasts, thanks to Blue Frame Technology. They are Hoopsville, or facebook.com/D3Hoopsville. They are also youtube.com/D3Hoopsville. So facebook.com/Hoopsville. youtube.com/D3Hoopsville. They're on the bottom of your screen. If you happen to be watching us on our Hudl Blue Frame Technology, and thanks to T1 Sports, where you can watch the show, either it's on Amazon Fire, Roku, it could be on your Apple TV. Anyway, you could be watching this lovely mug on your big screen. Lots to talk about in the tournaments, lots of questions to be answered as well. Certainly got to get through some things, and we'll be happy to do so on this show. A couple of notes. We'll bring in our quote-unquote experts, at least friends of the show. We like to call our friends of the show the experts. Come in, react to the show, react to what we saw today. We'll give you some insight, by the way, on some other things. But give you an idea of the men's and women's brackets and what we see, what we love, maybe what we'd love to see tweaked. And listen, at some point, we are maybe splitting some hairs. We'll also hear from both committee chairs. At this point, Megan Wilson looks like she'll come on at about 8:15, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time when she's done traveling back. And Sarah Quadracki will come on after that. Same thing when she's done traveling. Both of them were in Indianapolis this weekend and are working their way back. A couple of housekeeping notes. NCAA.com has updated the women's regional rankings and data sheets. So they are on the screen, or on the system for everybody. I noticed the men have not been, admittedly because Sarah was traveling and I couldn't get a hold of others, and I didn't try the whole committee. I haven't harassed about that, but we will try and do so here. So the men's regional rankings, the data sheets are updated on the men's side. I do know that much. But the regional rankings are not there. The women's looks like all of it is now there. So that is good to see. Glad that's been done, et cetera, et cetera. Again, we got our brackets out. Listen. First blush, second blush, third blush, there's a lot to like. I know there's people who are frustrated with some teams that got in or didn't get in. We were 19 of 20 on both men and women. That's not bad. Listen, I would love to hit 20 out of 20, and we have done so. We have hit every single one in the past. Actually, I think we hit it when it was 21 or 22, in fact. But it was tough. It was tough for different reasons on the men's and women's side. Interestingly enough, on the women's side, and I'm being very simple here, the team we chose versus the team they chose came down to a win-loss percentage. Wartburg had a great win-loss percentage. We talked ourselves out of it because of their 1-6 versus regionally ranked opponents, so I should look at that data to confirm that. And talked ourselves out of it. Interesting enough, and I mentioned it last night, a few years ago, we had a similar situation where we went with the team with a more rounded resume, and the committee went with a win-loss. Again, I don't think Wartburg is just a win-loss resume, and we'll talk with Megan Wilson about that coming up. But I did find it a little bit interesting. On the men's side, we predicted Utica last year would make the tournament, or at least most of the committee did, and Utica did not. We did not predict Utica would make it this year, and Utica did. So Utica fans, I'm just saying, while you remain in Division III still at this point, which we're thrilled about, I guess you want us to think you won't make it, and then you'll be in the tournament, or that, or go win your AQ. Either one will work, but there you go. Lots of it was interesting. Give you a little tidbit behind the scenes. Sorry about that. We had a bit of a day trying to get the brackets out. You'll have to understand the window for us to get these done, and us being Brendan Gulick, myself, and the production crew in Indianapolis, is tiny. I believe the deadline to get the brackets to everybody is 10 a.m. We got the men's at, I want to say, about 9:30 Eastern time. We then were planning to record at 11:30. Now remember, nobody in the production has seen a thing. So graphics people have to put all the graphics together. Video people have to find the video that they want to use. Again, I just want to point out the Top 16 show had more video of the teams than the NCAA show. That's not knocking our NCAA production team. I just want to thank all the SIDs who helped us out 2 weeks ago. And then Brendan's got to finish his scripts, and I got to work on mine. And as I was talking to my family today, it's amazing how every year I try something different with the way I prep my notes, and it never works. And I spent a chunk of time last night and this morning writing notes because I don't know the matchup. So I'm just trying to put down notes about every team to talk about that, considering Brendan's going to say the same thing, and I should really react to the bracket. And there's just not enough time. Anyway, fast forward, 11:30, sitting in the chair, ready to go. There's a delay. There's a problem with apparently some of the equipment behind the scenes. I think the closed captioning system. Long story short, I don't know when we started, but it was closer to noon for a bracket that's coming out at 1. And then Brendan and I went a little long. Admittedly, I don't know how long we went until it came out because I wasn't paying that close attention, except that I knew we were running a little heavy. And so we were trying to tighten things, him and I. What I didn't know then was when they went to ship it out the door, basically to Turner, they encode it, they put the closed captioning system and all. Apparently things went sideways. I don't know all the details. They apparently then got it to Turner, and then I think Turner had some issues on their end is what I'm guessing, but I'm not positive. From what I'm hearing, we were very close to redoing the entire men's show. And to some degree, I don't think I would have minded that. There's an element of this in my production world that wishes we would just do these live. But I appreciate that things like closed captioning, maybe they're not set up for live. You can be set up for live. They're not set up for live. But apparently Turner has to re-encode and all. My point is the window is too small to pull this off. What's the remedy? I don't know without getting rid of these shows. And I think the shows should stay. One idea I have I know isn't going to be well liked by some of our friends, and that's get rid of Sunday games, let the committee work on Sunday so that they're done by Sunday night, so that the production crew can even work Sunday night, and then Monday morning we could record it and have plenty of time to make a 1 o'clock window. I don't think that's going to happen, but that would be my preference. So have all the games done on Saturday so the committee can finish their work on Sunday. Production can work on Sunday evening. Brendan and I can have plenty of time to dive into what we need to dive into, and we're ready to go the next day. I didn't get a chance to look at the women's bracket until I was done recording the men's bracket, and we had, an hour until we were recording the women's show? So, yeah. There's no blame for the committee. I don't think this is a Turner blame. I think there were just a lot of technical issues because of a short window that came into play that just caused a snowball effect. And having worked in production for as many years as I have, and you have seen it on this show, sometimes things just snowball. To the point that I tested the system again today for this show to make sure our system works the way it's set up. And according to the test, it works just fine, but it didn't want to work last night. So, again, I know there's frustration that the men's show got pushed back an hour. I know there's frustration that the women's show got pushed back a little bit as well. This is not the committee's fault. This is not, in this case, Turner's fault necessarily. I think we got to figure out, the committee technically was done pretty late last night. Production crew, though, still didn't get a look at those brackets till 9:30. Maybe there's got to be some. I know the committee wants to wake up and look at those and make sure they made the right decisions. Maybe there has to be an element of this. Give them the bracket, let them get to work, and if there does need to be a change, you just alert to the change. And then we make the adjustment on our end. That's a lot easier than waiting for a full bracket that's perfect and having an hour and a half, if you're lucky, to pull it all together. I've worked in production a long time. We will go on the air with breaking news very quickly with very little resources. But a half-hour, 6 p.m. news show takes all day to produce, and when there's breaking news, it blows up, but there's 100 people there to help put it together, and I'm exaggerating a little bit. We're asking to do this in an hour and a half. So I know there was some frustration. I think the blame was pointed in the wrong direction. And some of the blame was on myself. Let's be honest. Maybe Brett and I talked a little too long. I couldn't tell. It felt good until I was getting pressure to go faster. And as a result, we missed teams. And I apologize. I missed mentioning teams. I absolutely blew it on the Keene State pod. I was so frustrated. You should have seen me. I was turning my mic off and saying a few choice words because I'd absolutely forgot to mention Keene, which is why I went back and did it, which is kind of dorky. And it snowballed into the women's show. The women's show did not go well. At one point, my mic was muted, which is why you didn't hear me talk about the Transylvania pod. But the crew handled it tremendously well. So just a bad day. And I apologize, everybody. Anything I screwed up, I think at one point I mentioned that Schreiner got the ASC crown. I thought I said SCAC, but apparently I said ASC, I'm told. Not sure where that came from because SCAC was in my head. Anyway, I apologize. I have a very high standard for what I do, as you probably saw from the Top 16 program. And I don't think I lived up to it. And then on top of that, we had some challenges on top of challenges. So it is what it is. I apologize again. We'll hope to do it better next time. And I hope we can find a way to do it better from that experience. So there you go. If you got questions for us, you can tweet us at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville, email us, etc. See there's some comments in the YouTube page. Our Blazer Bobcat fan from Albany, Georgia is tuning in. Thank you, sir. Mark Streff said, Elmhurst University just missed. First time listening, Dave. I found my new love, D3 Hoops. Mark, well, welcome in. Glad you had it. Yep, Elmhurst just missed out, unfortunately. Just as Bob said on the show last night, great resume other than that win-loss percentage. And yes, the win-loss percentage was comparable to Rochester, but Rochester's strength of schedule and results versus regionally ranked opponents were sky high in compared to Elmhurst, so Elmhurst just kind of eliminated themselves there. Daryl, I don't know what the problem was with your audio with us last night. Everybody else but you could hear us. Don't know what to tell you, my man, but I'm glad you can hear us today. Yep, Whitworth, congratulations to them on getting the automatic bid and getting to the NCAA tournament. Can we just discuss how much of a joke it is that Guilford get left out? Well, let's start first, and let's talk about what we talked about last night, and we'll talk more about it with the crew. Guilford's in the tournament, along with a lot of others, including WPI, probably. If one significant thing didn't happen this past week, and that was a ton of upsets, and we've warned about this over the years, that's always a potential with the parity out there. And so we had anywhere from 8 to 10, roughly, bid thieves. So let's consider that. Let's say we had 8 bid thieves, okay? 8 AQs that went to schools that had no chance at all of being in this NCAA tournament. None. Those thieves put together a scenario where we're picking teams at 18 that we would have been picking at 10. And so teams that we would have been picking at 18 were way off the radar. And we said it at the end of last night's show. We had win-loss percentages last year at the final table of 60%. We had win-loss percentages at the table this year of 80 and 70%. So yes, Guilford got left out in part because there were so many upsets, like Schreiner winning the AQ out of the SCAC conference. When you go in, or Albertus Magnus winning it out of the GNAC. When you realize that's our first point. We already had a very tight window to get at large teams in that deserved it, and we knew good teams were going to be left out. Now, to the larger point of why Guilford got left out, when looking at others, this is the Rochester conversation. And I said it last night, I'll say it again. I think we need to understand that the strength of schedule is having too strong a conversation. That is not a knock at Rochester. They went out there and played really good teams, but they only won 64% of the game. 16-9? And I admit 17-8 looks very different, but even then I'm a little skeptical at 17-8, but it's better. It's also a better resume. But we have an issue where a lot of schools cannot schedule 620, 630 SOSs. We also should probably take a look. Does the multiplication of home and away on the men's side really need to be around anymore. We have gotten to a point where coaches understand they need to be out of their home. They got to play on the road too, and not just play at home. I think we don't need to have that weighted measure in men's basketball anymore. And I think that maybe plays a role. I have to ask our math guys on that. But most importantly, I think we have to have a conversation that there is at some point got to be a bell curve. At some point, an SOS off the radar, high or low, just can't be pulling in either direction. And that goes with our Lancaster Bible conversation in 2016, which is a little bit of what Barry dealt with this year, except the difference with Barry is they had more losses than Lancaster Bible potentially were going to have. We were talking about one loss for Lancaster Bible. Barry had 3 at least, if not 4. And there's got to be a point where these metrics at some point can't pull the weight in either direction. They just stop. Whether that's called a Mendoza line or something, I don't know what the right term is. But at some point, we got to say, okay, great, they've got all those, but it's unmeasurable at this point. Like, it's too much. We can't sit here and just keep pulling and pulling and pulling and dragging a team that's, I'm going to be extreme here, 500 into the conversation because their SOS is so darn high. At some point, we just have to say, okay, the SOS is great, but it can't pull any further. And that's comparable to that .03 to 2 game measure that turned into .06 to 4 to .09 to 6 games at some point. And finally, people at the NCAA slapped back and said, enough, you've gone too far. We'll see. Listen, these metrics evolve, the committees change. I think last year, and we said it on the air, I don't think Rochester gets in last year's committee. And maybe Guilford then does. I also think the South region was really tough this year. I really do. I get the frustration in Guilford. I really do. I do wish Guilford would challenge themselves just a tad more, to be honest. Their brethren in the ODAC seem to be able to get a couple more tough games on their schedules than Guilford has seemed to. I'd like to see Guilford get 1 or 2 more. But again, I think the bigger story here is the fact that we had 8 to 10 bid thieves. And so the benchmark, the line where we probably would have been at making tough decisions was much higher up than we're used to. And I think that's a significant factor in all this. I think Guilford's in a normal year. Rochester's probably in too. WPI is probably in. Well, La Crosse is probably in. Utica's obviously in. Claremont Mudd Scripps is probably in. All of those at the table, I think a good majority of them are in this NCAA tournament if we didn't have so many bubble-bursting bid thieves. Because I think that was a major factor this time around, and we've talked about it in years past and it's never materialized. It absolutely materialized this year. So, just a thought. I mean, think about it. If Marietta had upset Mount Union, that's another bid thief. Like, we were taking teams off the top who were sure bet AQs. We certainly thought St. Joseph's would get in. We thought Oshkosh would win the AQ. You know, there were 3 teams from the WIAC because Whitewater won. I don't think Whitewater gets in otherwise. So, it's not a joke. Are there things we need to just have hard discussions about and maybe massage a little bit better? Absolutely. But that's a yearly conversation. But let's start with the conversation that the benchmark moved because so many teams got beat. And that's a huge factor. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll get the guys in to join us and talk about all of this and see what their thoughts are. Maybe I'm out in my own left field on this. I don't think I am. I think maybe some of it makes sense, but what do I know? Sometimes I'm literally in my own world, but we'll see what they might have to say about it. Before I take a break, I just realized that one of our new ads is not in the system, so bear with me while I add it appropriately to where it needs to be. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com from the WBCA NABC Studios. Thanks to our partners at Sports Tours International. And, of course, also our friends at the WBCA and NABC. Back with more after this.
For the love of the game, but for those of us who are Division III student athletes, it's more than that, a lot more.
Sure, the game is important, but as we work so hard to build both mind and body, it's more about team.
That is why NCAA Division III teamed up with Special Olympics, and in giving the gift of sport to those for whom it seemed an impossible dream, we are working to make this a better world.
Help us keep that dream alive.
You can make a difference.
I did receive a non-athletic scholarship upon entering school.
I got the presidential scholarship, which was huge for me.
I think there's more opportunities for academic scholarships in Division III.
I did receive academic scholarships. Just being involved on campus, being a leader, all those things combined kind of get me recognized. It's a great experience for me.
It starts right when you hit the court. You imagine your finest moment. The game-winning shot that gets you to the dance. A monster dunk or no-look pass, and cutting down the net. Sports lets us dream of our own success and prepare us for our finest moments on and off the court.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's nearly 850 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over 2 decades. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
It's on us to stop sexual assault.
In any way that we can.
To get a friend home safe.
To never blame the victim.
It's on us.
To stand up.
To make our community safe for all. It's on us.
It's on us to look out for each other at parties.
It's on us.
To be more than just a bystander.
To step up and say something.
It's on us, all of us.
To stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
And welcome back, everybody, as we are on Brackets Breakdown Special here on Hoopsville. If you got questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoopsville, hashtag Hoopsville. Email us, hoopsville at d3sports.com. Join us on Facebook, facebook.com/Hoopsville or youtube.com/D3Hoopsville. Ryan Daly says, I think Tufts has a chance to surprise people on the men's side, and I think they can go deep on the women's. I don't know if they're going to be a surprise on the men's side. We'll get opinions on that in a moment. Eric says, I totally agree, Dave, with the SOS being such a huge factor, and that sometimes needs to change. Something needs to change. Well, we'll see. I'm a WIAC, MIAC, and UMAC guy, and not all teams can schedule huge SOS teams. Fair. No matter the SOS RRO criteria, I stand by thinking Rochester getting in is an absolute nonsense. Okay, Travis, I get it. Everybody's got their opinions on it, including our crew of Misfit Toys. Wait, that doesn't sound right. Well, we'll try it anyway. Joining us on the Hudl Hoopsville Hotline, and I'm hoping this is working correctly because I worked hard this afternoon, other than putting my head through a wall after the brackets shows were done. I worked hard to get this to work. Joining us here, let's see, across the top it is Riley Zayas, Bob Quillman, Scott Peterson, and Pat Coleman. I'm Dave McHugh. Welcome in, everybody. Hello, gentlemen. How are you? Uh-oh. Did it again. Bear with me. I might be able to actually fix this quickly because it was working earlier. Oh, yes, we don't have audio here. That's my problem. There we go. How you guys doing? Oh. Are you kidding? It doesn't like me today after I tested it and everything. So here's a great example of the tech issues that I had on the show. So we're going to change this to that. And hopefully, guys, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you so.
And now everybody can hear you.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh, everyone was so sad.
I just thought maybe we would do a very good lip reading segment of the show.
That would be fun.
That would be fun.
I just realized there is one thing I forgot to do. I had some great reactions to run, but I was so interested in people who are already messaging us, we will do so when we're done with our group. We'll run that a little bit later in the program. Great reactions from schools who either knew they were clinched and figuring out where they were going, or on some of the chances they didn't know they were getting in. We got some reactions from teams like Wartburg and stuff who got into the. I love those the most. All right, guys. First and foremost, I'll say this: 19 out of 20 on both. Not really bad, considering how difficult they are. I know we all want to achieve perfection. We've done it on a couple of occasions. But, I mean, we went in pretty much going, man, if we nail both of these, we're playing with fire. So in the grand scheme of things, I'm not disappointed. But yeah, I'm a little disappointed.
I mean, Dave, we don't have the home court advantage here, right?
Right,
the NCAA committees have the home court advantage. They can do whatever they could, for all we know, look at our list at the end of the night and go, ha, what? You're kidding me. UW lacrosse? No, totally Utica. I mean, you know, the fact that we have ever gotten them all right is something that we should all be super happy about. And I will say this, too. I mean, there was a time not all that long ago where I think we missed 5 one year on the women's side, which was semi embarrassing, frankly. But I just kudos to everybody who has stepped up as we have retooled that, and we've gotten new people in to have those conversations, and those conversations are much smarter. And the women's committee has evolved as well. They're making, I think, decisions that are probably this group would consider smarter. But I'm very happy. I'm very happy with 18 out of 19 women pool Cs, 19 out of 20 for the men. 95% is an A, a solid A. I'm very happy.
On the men's side, I feel like, you know, we must have had the right order because Rochester had to have gotten in for Utica to get picked. So it means like we put Rochester in at 19, I think, and then Utica hits the board. So we were playing in the right place. I think we had the exact right final board. We had probably the same conversation the committee had, and it could have gone different ways. I don't really have any problem with them picking Utica. When I look at the resume, I just look at it and say, I get it, totally get it. It's a great resume. It really is. So I think we did a good job last night. We missed one, and it's really hard to get all 20.
I'd be super happy if Utica went out and won an automatic bid next time around. That'd be great.
Yeah.
And if that's in November for football, I'd be even happier. Let's, we miss them in football too. So there you go.
You were just trying to make up for the officials' call in that one, or lack thereof. Did I? Oh, I went there. I'm sorry. Scott and Riley, curious your takes on it, because I know you two worked really hard. I don't know if you're disappointed or not. Admittedly, it came down to maybe diving into those numbers a little bit more. That 1 in 6, I'm told, was not as bad as we kind of spun it off.
Yeah, this was a spot where, I mean, I'm very happy with 18 and 19 pool Cs because I think we had limited information to go on. When you see the regional rankings, each region is ranked compared to the teams only in their region. There's often lots of common and head-to-head going on, and it's hard to know exactly how the committee is valuing that stuff. We see top 16s, so we can see those teams relative to each other. But, for example, Eau Claire and Oshkosh were below that top 16 mark, and I didn't know how close they were in the region. And it turns out that Eau Claire going 2-1 in the final week, including adding a win via RO, and Oshkosh going 1-1 was enough to move Eau Claire ahead, which weakened Macon's resume because that win over Oshkosh was over a Region 4 instead of a Region 3. But I am fascinated that they did not view that Wartburg 1 in 6 that bad, because almost everyone else that got picked Pool C had at least 3 wins with, solid ones. And sure, Wartburg beat a 2, but 1 in 6 is not usually what you're looking for from what I was seeing.
I think it's the fact, I said this on the men's show, I didn't say it on the women's show. When you're looking at the 1 in 6, you are talking about who they played. And even losses do get considered to some degree. It's about the only place losses do get considered if you think about it. And I think that may have played a role. We'll learn from Megan maybe a little bit better coming up, because I don't want to quote her at all, because the conversation I had earlier definitely was not a quotable one, because I wasn't all that focused on making it a quotable one. Riley, your thoughts on it? Go
Dave,
ahead,
even
Scott.
Even for Wartburg, you can look at it and see that 584 SOS among the highest at the table. But if it's largely built on the backs of 6 losses to good teams, it's
fair.
like it's not. Megan said it's not a scheduling contest. So they went out and scheduled a bunch of teams and then lost to most of them. I don't know how much credit you want to put in that, but at the same time, you can't ignore the SOS that it was a standout at the table. You can't pick into it, right, and say like, well.
Final 3 for that 19th Pool C pick was because we said, well, the 1-6 versus ROs isn't going to work, and apparently it didn't have that much of an effect to get the committee to go in the direction of Wartburg versus Randolph-Macon, who we had for our 19th Pool C.
Sorry, folks.
It was just one of those things that made me go look at the data sheet right now and make sure that the committee agreed that Wartburg was 1-6. But yeah, you guys were working from the right data. The committee agrees Wartburg was 1-6. That's all 6 of their losses. That's 20-0 against non-regionally ranked opponents and 1-6 against everybody else.
Yeah, I wonder if that had something to do with it too. Their 6 losses were ranked. I don't know. We'll learn more. And listen, to be honest, at that point we were splitting hairs to begin with, and
100%.
Yeah. And granted, the women didn't have as many losses as the men. And Bob, I just said it on air. I don't know if you heard it, complaining about Rochester not getting in. There's an element here that Guilford not getting in. There's an element here that they didn't get in thanks in part to the fact that there was absolute carnage and our line rose in terms of teams that would normally get in, I think, are a shoo-in in a normal year.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that because people are thinking about the top 25 poll.
Well, that too, yeah.
They're I think someone said they're the highest top 25 team to not make the tournament. So that's what people's opinion is. Now, criteria-wise,
right.
I mean, look, those of us on the show last night, we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how this works, and none of us made a strong case for Guilford. No. Their resume was 786, 551, and 2 RRO wins. And neither of the 2 was something you're going to jump up and down about. So Guilford didn't get in because of the carnage, like you said. I just don't look real basketball. If we're picking teams to go play real basketball games, Guilford to me is a top 20 team in the country. But that's not how it works. It's not even close to that. Their resume in the criteria, it was not anything more than an end of the bubble in this process, an end of the bubble 50-50 kind of thing.
You talked about the ranking thing, right? It's that Capital team from 2002, the one that lost to Otterbein 3 times, and then Otterbein went on to win the national championship. Capital entered that NCAA tournament. Well, didn't enter the NCAA tournament. Ended regular season at number 14. That was in a 48-team or a 50-team bracket even. Way fewer at-large bids to even be considered at that point. So even though all of those things you said, nonetheless, for Guilford not to be included here, rightly or wrongly, I think we all agree there's a reason why they weren't in. It is nonetheless pretty historic.
Yeah, I think with it's important that we try to anchor people's opinions on this stuff as much as we can to the criteria, and a lot of times that's impossible, right? Because people are emotional and their team didn't get in, and I totally get that. So we're all objective in this. Like we don't have anything at stake, and there's data such as this. Like someone said on Twitter, winning games has to matter. It doesn't seem like winning games matters. Here's some real numbers that I just dug up. These are real numbers. In the last 6 seasons, there have been roughly 120 pool C's and B's, 120. 3 have been sub 667. Rochester this year, La Crosse in 19, and Oshkosh in 17. This year, Rochester set 2 Pool C records. Not that we keep records, I happen to keep records. Their 630 is the highest in the process, and their 10 RRO wins is matched only by Illinois Wesleyan last year.
You're not counting results for. You're not counting once ranked, always ranked, because that year we had something like.
No, the 10 is the 10.
Even then?
I have 6 years of data, Dave. There's no one that's ever had a 10 except Illinois Wesleyan last year, but that was when we were ranking way too many teams. It's an asterisk. Yeah. So here's my point with all this is, yeah, was this Rochester thing a crazy ass deal? Yeah, but there is a side to it that you have to consider, which is their resume was unique and had some like jump off the page numbers that we guessed they'd put in, and they put in. It's not as crazy as some people want to make it out to be. And it doesn't mean that they don't count winning 98% of all Pool C's in the last 6 years have been 667 or higher.
Yeah. It's essentially a line. I am perfectly happy for there not to be a hard and fast line that can never be crossed over. Where we are at right now is perfectly fine with me. We're making a big deal out of, 640 versus 720. One win makes a huge amount of difference in that winning percentage when you got 25 games, or when you're that far down the list. Maybe I'm not too concerned about it. My only regret is that you guys talked for 26 minutes about this last night. I went out and made a sandwich. I came back, and it did not occur to me I could just jump on the Zoom call and try to reset you guys. That's on me. I'll take that.
You did a nice job of that.
Take the L there.
It's funny that the Rochester women ended up with a 640 winning percentage themselves, with a standout SOS and VRO, but just not as strong as the men, and were never really considered because of that.
Well, I think that's where you have the difference in the committees where they've ebbed and they've flowed. And I think there's a valid argument to be had that I think last year's men's committee probably wouldn't have taken Rochester as seriously.
Could have. They took him at 680. Rochester got in last year at 680.
Yes. No. Absolutely. Yep. No, I've made that point. I said it's interesting how a game can make a difference there. But I mean,
Brandeis did not. Brandeis was left on the table, and they were at 15 and 10. Yeah. That was so. This is Rochester's right in the middle of those two.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just think my point on that, and then I'll let it go, is just simply, it's not like this happens every year.
Oh no, fair.
I think people are reacting to this as, well, they just threw winning percentage out the window. There's no history of that. There's been 3 sub 667s in 6 years. I don't have any further back data than that, but I'm sure the numbers look the same. Every now and then, there's just one of these unicorn resumes that come up at the right time. And we have to acknowledge that Rochester did have 2 eye-popping numbers out of the 5 primary criteria. So it's not as crazy as some are making out to be, is all I'm saying.
And a head-to-head win against Worcester.
Yeah, at Worcester, and then Worcester was on the right. So,
yeah.
I am, and again, I think we had a perfect storm too. That the benchmark, our line where we had to stop, was probably 8 schools before we normally would. Like, if we had had 2 bid thieves, we're going 6 deeper. And I think Guilford's in. And I think WPI might be in. And I think La Crosse might be in. Claremont Scripps might be in.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that line had a significant impact on how this all played out, because we couldn't go where we normally would, or the committee either, for that matter.
We had 2 of those that happened in the final hours of the season.
Too.
So
yeah.
Oshkosh and St. Joe on Sunday, those 2,
Yeah.
Those two were bubble bursters. So there's two teams, whether you want to make it Worcester and La Crosse or CMS and Guilford, that's two. And now we can go to Saturday and start to count things up. St. Thomas, those kind of so sure, I mean, this was a unique year, and teams that didn't make it this year, it mostly has to do with all the upsets there in the conference tournaments.
Right. Yeah, no, it's interesting. So I'm curious, you guys, from your take, now we've seen the brackets. Let's start on the women's side just because it's the most, it was and they should have gone first today anyway because we gave away all the stuff we needed to have. I really was excited looking at the women's bracket because they really showed some creativity. They got some great ideas. I even got excited doing the recording because it dawned on me as I was talking with Brendan Gulick. Greensboro's playing NYU at Messiah. Yeah. We don't tend to get that kind of interesting matchup. I know it doesn't sound great. Oh, it's a South region. Still, because NYU's not able to host, they could find somebody in the middle. They could bring two schools to that point and get creative with it.
Oshkosh and Washington and Lee, for goodness sake.
That's a great one.
It's a great matchup. You do not see these things, but it's it's within the 500-mile radius in each direction of Ohio Northern. So I was super happy that they did that. I feel like we have been projecting those things for women's basketball for several years and not gotten to see those things come to fruition. So I'm super happy to see it this time around.
Gettysburg's playing New Paltz at Babson.
Yep.
Again.
That's another door.
Yeah, it just... Riley, your thoughts. I know you haven't had as many years as all of us, but you've dove in deep on this stuff. What are your thoughts?
Tried, Dave. One of the ones that you guys haven't mentioned yet that kind of did stick out to me, I really like the fact that they got Milliken to Transylvania.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I think that was a very, very good one, especially because you have that Emory-Milliken first-round matchup, and then you could have a Transylvania-Milliken second-round matchup, which isn't generally what we're going to see on the first weekend in that Transylvania pod. So I thought that was a very kind of creative way of doing things. I thought the committee did a nice job of creating some very good matchups, protecting some of the top seeds, but also, giving us some interesting matchups that don't keep everyone just in a very close regional proximity.
Yeah.
I think, Dave, in past years, you have had the women's committee chair on this show after the selections, and that person has come out and basically said we didn't want to send people too far in a bus. It's like, I think you're missing out on part of the essential NCAA tournament experience by going and playing somebody else, right? You could have Johns Hopkins against E-Town or something. That's not super fun to me. Johns Hopkins against Skidmore, super random.
Yeah.
All the other things we talked about. Baldwin Wallace against Wartburg. Lots of great matchups here, and I love to see this group use the map.
Where's the other one I just spotted? Not that I just spotted it, but I forgot about it. Oh, you got Whitman to fly to Chicago. They'll take on Eau Claire, while Chicago is hosting Northwestern. It's not hugely creative, but you get a chance to make that happen. Rhode Island's going to take on Rowan. That's not too bad. What was...
Marietta,
Berea.
Eastern Connecticut.
Right. Good one.
Ohio Wesleyan Gustavus.
Another one. They're sending Berea to Loris. And by the way, both men's and women's pods upper right regarding Christopher Newport.
I was floored.
Both of them have Texas parked in those larger pods. Both of them have creativity there.
If chalk holds in that Christopher Newport women's quadrant, none of the four can bust to any of the four. And I didn't think that would be a possibility. But that was just about the only scenario to guarantee Christopher Newport a sectional host should they get there. And maybe it's even not guaranteed with the men. But
this is your chance to give Texas a host, frankly.
Right. I was going to say men get the priority, and the men's pod, it's actually the lower right. I apologize. The men's pod, and we'll talk more about the men in a moment, has that Texas group. It also has other, and nobody can get to anybody in that grouping. So both committees have Christopher Newport in a spot where they have flexibility, first off, protect them second, and third, anybody could host. So let's
It
just
also creates drama around the matchup between Christopher Newport and Hampton-Sydney on the men's side.
Good point.
Christopher Newport is the higher seed. Hampton-Sydney gets a freebie host. If Hampton-Sydney comes out of there and they're one of the 4 teams and the other 3 are chalk, Hampton-Sydney could end up hosting because I was looking at that. Someone can get there.
That's Emory can get there, which is why it's there in the first place. That's
yeah.
They're sneakily a little southern in Virginia.
It creates drama around that matchup, and like you said, Dave, and on the men's side, that lower right, yeah, it'd be 3 flights.
Yeah.
If chalk holds and it's Christopher Newport and Mary Hardin Baylor or St. Thomas, Texas, and
or any of the Texas.
Yeah, Pomona Pittsburgh. I mean, it's flights. I love the fact that they were able to do that.
Yeah.
That seems pretty cool to me.
And go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know we sort of drifted past the top right women's quadrant for a second, but I wanted to get Gordon Mann's voice into here. It's not a particularly unique take. I think a lot of people have said this, but that's a pretty brutal part of the bracket as well. If you have chalk come out of there and it's Christopher Newport, Hope, Trinity, and Tufts, you know, that's often a really good Final Four, let alone a round of 16.
No, you're right.
It is brutal. It's brutal as far as the basketball teams go. As far as their NCAA resumes, it is very fairly balanced with the other quadrants.
Sure.
True.
And what's really go ahead.
I think the Smith quadrant is the easiest, and I think they're the number 1 overall seed.
Yes.
And I like giving them the easiest road.
No,
yeah,
I agree with that.
They try to.
What's interesting too is that they all could. We said they might maybe go to Texas with it, and then they're going to go to Trinity, the winners, just to try and come back to Texas.
They could drive back to Texas. There's plenty of time.
Plenty of time. They'll 2 weeks. Sightsee on the way back. Or like Whitman did on the men's side the year they won in Marietta. They just stayed on the East Coast. I remember walking up to Eric Bridgeland after the game. I said, "What's your plans?" He goes, "Oh, we're going to head back." I'm like, "You're not." He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Why don't you just stay here a couple days?" And like the light bulb went off and they ended up staying.
George Fox women did the same thing.
Right.
They had a sectional at Hope, and then the championship was at Hope, and they just stayed.
Right. Hey, let's pivot.
That's cheaper too. It's much cheaper.
Yeah. Agreed. Let's pivot back to the men on this bracket. There were so many things. First off, they flew both SkyX East.
Yeah.
I'm a little leery that they went all the way to the East Coast. I don't know if there's going to be any pushback on that. I mean, I like it from a bracketing standpoint. I like it from a matchup standpoint. But I'm very conscious that it is a west to east decision there for both teams.
Right.
All
it is
three
coast
teams.
to coast. It's coast to coast, and that is a big deal.
Yeah.
Like when we were mock bracketing last night, Ryan and Scott and I were very cognizant of that. It's like, so we sent, I believe in our mock bracket, we sent California teams to Ohio. That seemed like a reasonable alternative. Obviously, it's cool to see Cal-Lu at Rowan, and it's cool to see Pomona Pitzer at St. Joe's. Those are awesome things. That is a big wear and tear on a student athlete, and it's a lot of time spent in airplanes. And I was trying to cut an hour and a half or whatever off of each of those flights. That's one thing that I think previous committees have talked about and have learned and have maybe decided not to do anymore. But that's the sort of institutional knowledge that gets lost because people, roll off of the committee after 4 years, 5 years, 6 years.
I will
My
add,
thoughts anyway.
I don't know if anybody picked up on it. I know I did when I was looking at it and said it on air. Whitworth's flying to Swarthmore. That was the 2020 match. They almost got on their plane. I thought, I just kind of chuckled to myself, went, I don't know if there's anybody on the committee who remembered that. Because if they did, that's a nice little ode to the 2020 season there.
Another thing that's cool about the men's bracket, over the years, it's always been a challenge because there's been so many teams in the, what's now the region 7, 8, 9 area and there still are. But if you look at the top seeds, this is really a heavily East Coast influenced bracket, as it should be by the seeds. So if you take a look at the men's bracket, the overall number 1 seed is Randolph-Macon. The overall number 2 seed is Swarthmore. On the back on the other side, I believe it's Rowan and Christopher Newport. If I'm reading the bracket right, the way they're slotted, I believe Christopher Newport, Rowan, Randolph Macon, and Swarthmore.
Yeah.
So like that is a unique thing to have the brackets set up that way. Usually, you would have one of these things that would say, UW Stevens Point or Augustana or something like that. And there are, if you look at it, there's plenty of that in there. But how cool is it that like Wheaton, the champion of the CCIW, can play St. Joe of Connecticut in the Sweet 16?
Yeah.
So they had to, we've been talking about this a while. The challenge of this bracket was all the powers that are in the East. I'm not saying all of the powers in the East, but
you're finally
as far
admitting
as
it.
seeding, it's heavily influenced in the East. So they had to get creative in how to match those kind of the East and the Midwest and the rest of the country up.
No, I agree. By the way, anybody surprised Swarthmore got the number 2 treatment?
No, they had the case. That's where I had them.
Okay.
After yesterday, 889, 565, 8 and 2. I thought they were real easy number 2.
Okay. I trust me. I take your word for it because mainly it was a little bit of a blur to me, but I just thought the win moved them up further than I expected them to move. But
had they lost at Johns Hopkins in that final game, which was tight, had they lost that game, they wouldn't be on that line.
Yeah.
That would have, right? So it's a big deal.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love hoops. I mean, 2 previous years, Hopkins did the same thing to them and absolutely caused some turmoil there. Hey, I like that Oswego's getting a chance to host. It also gives them a chance to put John Carroll versus Albertus Magnus together. I also like the fact that Hamilton's coming down to Baltimore. Arcadia, Wabash, and Whitewater are going to be a case. We talked about Cal Lou. That's going to also have Utica and Babson. Actually, the more traditional one might have been Hope, Bethany Lutheran, Wisconsin, Oshkosh, and Fontbonne in one pod. That's what we're kind of used to, and I'm not complaining about it. North Park's taking on Swanee at Wash U against Co. That's a cool little one, too.
And that's a good example of, in that one, have we seen the men's regional rankings yet? I don't think.
They're just going live.
They just went live. Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me, Pat, is North Park ahead of Wash U in Region 8? I thought that North Park would be 2.
North Park is 2 ahead of Wash U in Region 8. So I think this is a geographic thing, right? You want to get Sewanee and...
Yep.
Correct. Sewanee could get to St. Louis, and by seeding North Park, if it was North Park and Wash U, geography not in the mix, North Park should be hosting. So North Park is ranked ahead of Wash U, but is going to Wash U because Sewanee could get there. That's a tough break for North Park.
Yeah. It is.
Right. I mean, that's a geographic host. It's not by much, right? Wash U's got a pretty good resume. Similarly, Oswego is a host because they are within 500 miles of both John Carroll and Albertus Magnus. But again, Oswego certainly had the resume to be pretty close to hosting anyway. We used to see more of these, and Hampton City, we talked about that already, as a geographic host. And I suppose maybe we may consider Mary Hardin Baylor a geographic host. I think we kind of considered them a 2 in a pod instead of a 1. But, I guess I used to say we used to see more of these, but now I just named 4. Maybe that's the right amount.
And I've heard a lot from John Carroll fans, very disappointed that they're going on the road. That could have gone either way, that one. They were like in a 1 to 16 seed. John Carroll was like 4-ish. And when you're 4-ish and you're matched up with 5, that can go either way. And so I thought John Carroll would host, but they were certainly at the mercy of a geography kind of thing. And John Carroll got upset, and that's what bumped them out. They would be hosting had they won that game against, was it Marietta beat them, right?
Maybe, but just for argument's sake, Oswego does make for a nice geography host. Nothing,
Yeah.
Just because you can get Carroll and Albertus Magnus and all that. It's just for argument's sake. I agree with you, Bob. I think the loss did hurt him a bit. But I was also thinking along the lines of geography. So Oswego's a cool place to be. Hopefully it doesn't snow too bad. Texas pod, kind of saw that one coming.
The fact that as we were putting this stuff together, Dave, that we could identify seven island teams, and if you think about Emory as one, it's really 8. There were a lot of things that you could do. There were a lot of things that some things that we had to do. I think if we had had a little bit more time, Ryan and I, to work on it, it wasn't 1 o'clock in the morning, and we could come back with fresh eyes in the morning and put out a bracket. Maybe we would have thought of a way to do that even better. But that was an opportunity for the committee to do some things and send teams places. And if nothing else, if you're in the SCIAC this year, you get the opportunity to see your teams go out and play somebody else. For goodness sake, you're not playing the Northwest Conference. You're not playing somebody from Texas. You're not playing each other. I mean, frankly, I'll be honest. I don't have a high national opinion of Rowan this year. Cal-Lu is a 500 team, right? But that's not a bad place for them to go. How about a pitcher against Williams? I mean, first of all, U.S. News and World Report rankings be damned. Those are 3 of the elite institutions in NCAA Division III.
Absolutely.
I say 3 for reasons. I think you understand why. I love those matchups. I'm glad to see them.
The Texas pod, the sometimes the geography really messes with seeding. In this case, it did. A couple reasons. St. Thomas should not be playing East Texas Baptist, according to seeds. That's a number 1 seed, St. Thomas, playing an ETBU that, was probably overall closing in on like a number 20 point or somewhere in there. That's a rough first round matchup right there. And then Mary Hardin Baylor, assuming they beat Shriner, Mary Hardin Baylor shouldn't be playing St. Thomas, Texas in round 2. Though seeding wise, those are brutal matchups, but there wasn't really much other way to do that, I don't think.
Well, Shriner also blew it up. I mean, Shriner forced another team in there too. Congratulations to Shriner, don't get me wrong.
And Shriner's the 4 in that pod, and I think St. Thomas should be the 1, but you can't play St. Thomas and Shriner against each other either.
So I'm curious. St. Thomas was the 1 in the final regional rankings.
They are the 1 in the final regional rankings, so they should be the 1 in that pod for as well.
But they gave it to Mary Hardin Baylor.
Right.
Did they not put into host? That's a question for
not what I've been told.
I think they made a facilities decision.
I'm wondering the same.
I don't know a thing about UST's facilities down there.
Small.
Yeah, all I know is from watching web streams, and I watched about 35 times this year. They have a whole side that has no bleachers. They have, you're watching the web stream and it's benches and wall. So I'm guessing the side that you can't see is 10 rows of bleachers or something.
Riley, you haven't been down there, have you?
I have not. No, I've watched a lot of the web streams, but haven't gotten a chance. I haven't really had a reason to go down there and cover them yet. But yeah, I agree with Bob. I don't think they have. I don't know their official seating capacity. It can't be very much, especially when you compare it to Mary Hardin Baylor, if that came into play.
Maybe they're just making sure that members of our crew could get to games easily. Mary Hardin Baylor's in Riley's backyard, and they made sure there was one in Baltimore or at least Randolph-Macon. And
a little closer for me to get to Mary Hardin Baylor than it is to Houston.
I see it, Pat. Yeah.
There are no games in Minnesota.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's punishment for punting St. Thomas to Division I.
That was definitely my decision, so I will take that L for you.
No, that just dawned on me because again, I didn't see the regional ranking, so I had assumed Mary Hardin Baylor had moved ahead of them.
So St. Thomas stayed number 1, Pat.
Yeah,
they did. St. Thomas 1, Mary Hardin Baylor 2, Pomona Pitzer, ETBU, Claremont, Redlands, UTD.
Okay, I think we had.
By the way.
Yeah.
We didn't need ETBU. Never mind. Disregard.
We're talking about who's left at the table, right? So just at a glance.
That's what I was thinking of.
It is definitely Colby out of Region 1. It's WPI clearly out of Region 2. These are things that are not surprising. If Utica was the last one in, then Nazareth probably never got to the table in Region 3, but that was next. you go to Kane in Region 4, right? No, DeSales, excuse me.
DeSales we had on the board.
DeSales in Region 4. Alvernia, Muhlenberg in Region 5.
We had them.
Yep. Guilford in Region 6, obviously. Guilford was ahead of Maryville. I know that was an ongoing question all regional ranking season. Worcester in Region 7. Elmhurst in Region 8.
CMS.
La Crosse in 9. And CMS in 10.
So we had the right board.
We had the
Get the right board. That in and of itself is damn difficult, right?
And because we had that, we also had the right RROs. So like Matt took those rankings, and I think Utica went from 3 RRO wins to 6. Not that it helped us. We didn't take them, but I want to say that we had every right piece of data. If we were ever going to get 20, that was the year. We were set up pretty good there.
Well, I tried to print them.
20 before.
They didn't print right, so I guess that's not going to help me.
We have gotten 20 before, so don't say if we were ever going to get 20.
Oh, yeah, we've done it. We
will do it again. We will still be here, and those committee chairs who, threw down the gauntlet at us will be off doing something else 2 years from now.
We're going to ask Sarah why she threw the gauntlet. I have a feeling I don't know what. No. I've had 6 thoughts on it. I've actually had many people ask me why they thought Sarah threw the gauntlet at us. I was admittedly surprised when she did it. Don't want to keep going. Really what it is I could take a break if we want to and reset. We're waiting to find out when Megan is available to join us, and we'll talk to her, and then Sarah will be joining us a little bit later. Again, both of them traveling back to their respective homes. Anything else jump out at you about some of these matchups? What I did find interesting was I didn't see a lot of tough first round games that just seemed like they missed on
not first round.
No, there's gonna be tough second round games, especially on the men's side, because everybody can beat everybody these days. There are definitely some interesting second round games potentially. On the men's side, if Rochester gets past Nichols, and I think that's a tough one. I think Nichols is really good. But if they get past them and Middlebury gets past Worcester State, you got a fascinating second round game between Rochester and Middlebury, which I would argue that was the part of the piece of the equation that got Rochester into the tournament.
On the men's side, I think the toughest matchups in the first round, quick glance, Pomona, Pitts, or Williams.
Yeah.
If we're going by where we think the seeds are,
that's a good point.
That's one that those two teams, shouldn't be playing against each other. And then I go back to the Texas pot. I think St. Thomas and ETBU, if you're looking at wow, that's a great first round game that you wouldn't have expected to see until round 2. Those two stand out to me.
That's a good point.
Other than that, I don't see anything that's too crazy in the first round. You know what's good? Wabash and Whitewater.
Hampton, Sydney, Emory.
Oh yeah.
That's gonna be a good battle.
Yeah,
criteria-wise, maybe it makes sense, but they're both South Region teams who are.
Hampton Sydney is ranked 20 in our poll, and Emory is not ranked. I think our poll thinks that's a good matchup.
Fair, fair.
Wabash and Whitewater are 2 unranked teams, but
it's a 4-5.
That could be number 32 versus number 33, right? And be a great matchup and a great game. And
regional ranking-wise, that's a 4v5.
I was kicking myself when I saw that, because of all the places that we mapped to try to get Whitewater last night, we did not think to map them to Case Western, so we missed on that. I think if Ryan and I had seen that, we might have reconsidered where we put Whitewater also.
But quickly about the Hampton Sydney Emory, that's a 4 and the 5 in the region. So that's the only twist. And again, it might be geographics at that point.
That's the only place Emory can go.
Right. Yep. Yeah, Right. I'm just wondering.
I had wondered if they would fly Christopher Newport. I think it's 565 miles from Christopher Newport to Emory. I was wondering if they'd maybe give Emory a host. Now, I was thinking this back when Barry was in the conversation. You have Emory and Barry. But once Barry was out, then you had to send Emory somewhere, and they can only get to Hampton Sydney. There's only so much you can do with that 4 teams if you're going to bring Newport there.
Yep.
I just went to the mileage website. Does it not work anymore?
Oh, there's a new one. We'll
New
send you a
link,
link.
and it's much better.
Oh.
It is much better. I'll say this, though,
Oh.
and maybe it's only football people who can answer this, but I thought Whitewater to Mount Union used to be under 500, and it registers at 504 or something now.
I thought that was under.
But I thought, but maybe only the football people really know.
Well, why? Why would you know?
Why would Whitewater and Mount Union be something you'd need to know?
That is pretty funny, yeah. Whitewater, Mount Union, and basketball. It's a new era.
I would have loved that. That would have been great.
Google says it's 500. I'm not getting very specific, so it could be longer. I didn't realize there was a new link. I just went to it to double check the distance from Farmingdale to Hamden, Sydney. Because admittedly, that feels more than 500 to me.
But it's straight down 95, and then you get to Richmond, and you go west for about an hour.
No, that's true. I might have it wrong, but I just.
There's a good mileage one in sectional potentially. If a sectional is Oswego and Randolph-Macon, it's $4.99. It's $4.99 from Oswego State to Randolph-Macon. That's pretty impressive bracketing work by the committee.
With Hopkins and Case in the middle. Yeah, that would be interesting. Well, now I want this. You send me the link, Pat. I want to check out this new.
Scott Part put it in our group chat here.
Oh, I'm not. Different computer, so I'll get it another time. It's all good.
That explains why you weren't getting all of my messages about we need to move on to the next topic.
No, because I'm over here, and you're over here.
Hey, gents, I do have to run. I got a conflict here. It starts in a couple of minutes, but
we don't
appreciate
have conflicts on hoops.
So me on. Yeah, I mean, there's non-hoop stuff that happens every now and then, but appreciate. Hey, kudos to Riley and Scott. I've said this on Twitter.
Yeah.
But what you guys are doing on the women's side has been an absolute game changer. I keep hearing a lot of feedback about that from coaches, fans on the women's side, and so probably those you're not even hearing from are like very appreciative of what you're doing. So I'll talk to you guys soon. I'm sure I'll see you all soon somewhere or the other. So have a great show, guys.
Thanks, Bob. You take care of yourself, bud.
Guys, thank you.
We'll readjust our screen here now that Bob's popped off. No, Riley and Scott have been doing great work. Now, the only problem with that, gentlemen, is expectations are now very high. So good luck to you.
I just want to get you guys on the print platform. I know people maybe still read websites.
No, that's true. I give you that. Guys, any thoughts on the women matchups? Scott, you made a little comment there about the second round for sure.
So as far as the first round, I see 3 matchups that I think both are involved number 2 seeds in pods. They're both kind of 2s, and that's Marietta, Eastern Connecticut, Oshkosh, Washington Lee, and I had one more that was Elizabethtown Stevens. I think all those teams would be in the top 32 teams in the field, and so for each of them might be a little bit rough of a first round matchup, but it's not very far off. And if you look at all the 1 seeds in each pod, they have very fair matchups. So I think it was a really solid job done by the committee overall. The one hosting thing that I did not expect, it is most likely geography related, is Rhode Island College did not get to host. And they were my 12th overall seed. And Ithaca ended up hosting. They were my 23rd overall. On the face of it, it seemed like you could probably make that work, but I haven't dug into any of the specifics. They were obviously doing stuff with higher seeds.
Remember, Ithaca was in that top 16, so they were already in a position of strength from the committee's perspective. I understand they lost 2 of their last 3. I appreciate that data changed, but
Rhode Island College was already ahead of them and won the rest of their games, and Ithaca lost twice. I think they diverged quite a bit.
I just hope that if someone wants to cut the net down at Ithaca, that they're going to be allowed to this weekend.
Someone shell out the $40 for another net.
Trying to figure out where the shot just came from.
Another net and a Werner ladder.
Holy lordy! Shots fired! Shots fired!
All right, Dave's getting punchy.
Hold on. I did the top 16. Am I forgetting I didn't talk about Rhode Island?
I'm almost positive they were in there, but
I thought that they were in there.
I could have clearly lost my mind. Don't get me wrong. It's been a long weekend. But I'll take your word for it.
I'm almost positive they're up there.
Okay. No, that's fine then. Then I've got a completely misunderstood perspective on that. I'll admit, though, I was a little surprised Ithaca was hosting only because they lost 2 of the last 3. So I thought they had played themselves out of that position. Rhode Island wasn't there, right?
Rhode Island College is not in the 16. Was not in the 16.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't lost my mind then. I mean,
Trinity
it's
was
possible.
Trinity was 12, and they're not in the. Are they both in the 1? Little East is in the 1 or the 2?
Yeah.
2.
They're in the 2. I may never get the 1 and the 2 in my brain straight. Babson's in the 2, right? Babson was 7.
And Smith.
And Smith, of course, Smith was 1. The
By the
Babson
way,
cut off.
Smith's got a really good spot here. Lynn Hersey has done a terrific job with this program, and look at where she's positioned them. They have gotten to being the top dog in the tournament with a chance at making a significant run here. I am so impressed with what they've done at Smith.
Absolutely. It was a couple weeks ago, and Tufts has been peaking since then, but Tufts was not competitive against Smith at that entire game. I was like, I don't think Tufts is a top 40 team. And then in the last couple weeks, I was like, wait, they're a top 15 team. Smith, did whatever they wanted to do in that game.
I'm really impressed. And I'm hoping if I can get into a place this offseason where I want to be, where we can do some off-season podcasts like we planned. One of them I want to, Pat knows I've talked about this. I'd love to get the single-sex coaches on and talk about the recruiting and the challenge there is. Because that's what I think makes what Lynn's done so much more impressive. It makes what Caleb Kimbrough has done at Hampton-Sydney so impressive. Because it looked, and I interpreted it as a change in the idea of going to a single-sex college. But Wabash and Hampton-Sydney have turned around and become back into the national conversation. Smith has made that happen. We've seen Wellesley, but we've also seen Wellesley fall off, so it's hard to say. Because I'm used to the Bryn Mawrs, the Trinity Connecticut's, the Hollands, the Sweetbriars, the whatever you want to call it, who can't figure this out. I'm blown away with what she's doing at Smith.
I know Dave means Trinity, DC. I
Who
agree.
did I say?
You said Trinity, Connecticut,
Oops,
and I was
meant DC.
a little thrown for just a second.
No.
One of the things that's different about Smith, and not to say compared to some of the other women's only schools that you talked about, is Smith is an elite academic institution. It is a destination that you want to go to if you have the opportunity to get a Smith college education. That's something you go and do. And and I don't want to take anything away from our colleagues who went to Wabash, and there are multiple colleagues of ours in D3 Sports who went to Wabash, and all the Hampton-Sydney people. Those are great schools. They are fine institutions. They're not Smith.
No,
Smith. When I talked about Williams and Pomona and Pitzer, 10 minutes ago, Smith is exactly that kind of institution as well. That's a destination place you want to go.
Agreed.
Now, the people who come out of Wabash and Hampton-Sydney come out with great stories of what an amazing collegiate experience it was to be at an all-male institution, and I hear nothing but good stories about that. But man, if you can make Smith is already a destination. If you can make an athletic destination as well, that's just amazing. It really kind of has an opportunity to compound upon itself and make that a NESCAC style juggernaut.
I completely agree. The only comparison I'll give is that Wellesley I would consider the same, and they're not having the same success that Lynn is having. But again,
they did for like 5 minutes 20 years ago.
Right, that's my point. It's a little quick flash in the pan. But to your point, that also makes Smith even harder to get into. So it just really love what she's doing, and I hope they can spin it out here in the season. I mean, listen, that's not an easy. Yes, it's the easiest grouping. But they still have some beasts in that. Scranton is a potential. I'm looking at the men's side. Whoops. Very different.
Smith has DeSales, Trinity, Connecticut, and Whitewater.
Yeah.
So that's another spot. They are willing to fly that Whitewater pod into a sectional.
And that's a Whitewater team that was runner-up last year, and a DeSales team having only having a season that's only ties it for its best ever. So.
And Dave, you're going to say harsh things about me looking to the future when the season is not yet done, the way I was looking at regional rankings when we were in January. I have DeSales returning a tremendous amount of their team in a standout way, which they still have this year to make waves, but they are among the standouts on that stat.
You're right.
Maybe we can get DeSales back to Las Vegas. That would be awesome.
Oh, that would be awesome. Get them both there, for that matter. It'd be great to have them both there. We have got Megan available in a few minutes, so I'm going to wrap things up with you guys. Appreciate the time you gave us. That was a nice long. It did not feel like an hour chat. That was really fun to do. Appreciate all your perspectives. Answered some questions as well. I hope maybe change the tenor of some of the conversations out there as well. But we'll go around the horn as always. Get the final word. Scott, we'll start with you. Any final thoughts on what you saw today?
I'm very excited for a national bracket that looks tremendously balanced. We can get every single matchup that we want. I think we wanted try and hope in the championship game last year, but they're on the same side. You really can't quibble with it this year. You have Smith, Scranton, Newport, and Transylvania completely separated. And it could be, if those four make it to the Final Four, it could be wildly exciting. And really, whoever makes it will be wildly exciting.
I agree. Riley, your thoughts?
Yeah, and we've talked about it quite a bit, but I was sitting there at Mary Hart Baylor today watching the men's selection show play out and was just very impressed with the way the geography was set up and what they were able to do to get some of those really, really good matchups on the men's side. On the women's side as well, you know, something I kind of hinted to this morning when I was writing up something on the scoop on D3 Women's Hoops was the fact that, you know, this is a day where we can see, you know, a lot of people leave feeling very excited. A lot of people also see their seasons end today. And I just thought it was really, really well done by the committee to kind of evaluate those resumes, balance them out. I thought they evaluated the strength of schedule really, really well. And ultimately did a good job in creating some of those pods to give us some very good matchups, but also keep those top seeds in a favorable spot. Hopefully maybe to the Final Four if they keep playing the way they are.
No excuse, Riley. Championships in your backyard. Just saying. I'm just saying.
I'll be in Dallas.
He's going to be there. I think it's him and Gordon for D3 Hoops from there.
Not bad.
So,
not bad. You'll love it. I had a great time in Indianapolis when they did it last. It is so much fun with all three in the same building, I may add. That's what makes it so great. Pat?
Well, you know, I could have just said ditto Scott or ditto Riley, you know, like Gordon said most recently as well. I think one thing that I would add was I was happy to see that the women's bracket joined the men's bracket in intentionally spreading out the tip-off times of these games. You got, you know, Johns Hopkins and Skidmore, and you got St. Vincent and Cortland being off at 4 o'clock, all the way to 8 o'clock Central for Northwestern U of Chicago and the UTD Trinity Texas game. You know, would it be cool to see every 20 minutes, every 15 minutes? I love seeing that on the men's bracket.
That is cool.
This is really good, though. This is really good. I'm very happy to see this. It's going to just, again, I think it's going to be a great showcase for the product that is Division III women's basketball. And, you know, I know Megan Wilson has another job that she also does, but if you wanted to, you know, if we wanted to campaign for her to, I don't know, maybe she should be hired by the NCAA to be the liaison for this sport. That would be great. This is very good. I'm super happy with how this is turning out so far, and I'm excited for games to start on Friday.
She could definitely be a good ombudsman for things. I agree. Yeah, no, looking forward to it. I agree with you. I love the staggered starts. The men's is brilliant. That's just how it's evolved. But it's just great to see that the women are there as well. We'll talk to Megan about that here quickly. Gentlemen, thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate it. You guys enjoy some downtime and enjoy the tournament. We'll look forward to talking to you down the road.
Sounds good.
See you later.
I've got a cold one to pour here in a second.
Oh, you enjoy that. I'll get mine later. And Ryan Scott, Pat Coleman, and Riley Zayas joining us on the Hudl Hoopsville Hotline. We'll take a break. When we come back, Megan Wilson will join us to talk about the women's selections, and up later in the show, Sarah Quadracki will join us to talk about the men's process. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com from the WBCA NABC Studios. Thanks to our partners, especially Sport Tours International, and yourself as well have donated to the cause. We appreciate those of you who've helped raise the funds for this program. Please consider to do it as well. We've got the information on your screen. We'll have more of it on social media as well.
There are over 480,000 college athletes only 2% would go pro.
That means over 470,000 will not get a shoe contract. No autographs. No private jets. No fan clubs. No Hall of Fame inductions. Instead, they will walk away with something much more valuable.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
There are over 480,000 college athletes. Only 2% would go pro.
That means over 470,000 will not get a shoe contract. No autographs. No private jets. No fan clubs. No Hall of Fame inductions. Instead, they will walk away with something much more valuable.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
And welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. As we continue on this Bracket Monday edition of the show, we will have Megan Wilson joining us here shortly. Double checking we sent her the right information because you never know. If you got questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us hoopsville at D3sports.com. Or join us on Facebook, facebook.com/Hoopsville or youtube.com/D3Hoopsville. Blazer Bobcat says, good luck to both basketball teams from Emory of Atlanta in this season's NCAA tournaments. Emory's the lone Georgia team to advance the postseason play this year. That is right. They are. Number of schools, I'm not going to get them all right, have both programs in. Emory, LaRoche, Whitewater, hang on, Scranton. I know there's more. I'm not going to get them all. Those are just a couple off the top of my head. I know I'll remember some others. Mary Washington, Christopher Newport. There's quite a few. Pretty impressive. Hang on, reading an email. I'll get back to that. But if you do have questions, fire away. We'll try and answer them best we can along the way and see what we get. Megan Wilson is available to join us here momentarily, so we will get to her in a second. I'm hoping the audio setup for this works. For some reason, it doesn't like working for the other group, but we believe it works for this side, so we will check it. I'm actually going to cheat, folks. We're going to do this live on air and ask Megan to actually give me an audio check, see if it works. I don't think it did. Well, we'll have to do it the old-fashioned way. If you know what the sad part is, folks, is things get tested and then they don't work, and then you wonder why they don't work, and you don't have an answer because it makes no darn sense. But it is what it is. We'll try it anyway. We're going to fly by the seat of our pants because that's how we do things here on the show, because sometimes I just don't care. I just want to go on. So join us on the Hudl Hoopsville Hotline. The aforementioned Megan Wilson, who is looking good considering, Megan, I suspect sleep has been maybe an option that you didn't have?
Night than I have in the past.
There we go. What'd you say?
I got a lot more sleep last night than I have in the past.
Well, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Hold on, let's try something here. Oh, no, that is working the way we wanted it to. How about that? All right, so question. If you got more sleep, were you trying hard enough?
I think we tried too hard.
Oh, do tell. Why do you think you tried too hard?
No. I think our efforts going into the week and going into the weekend, all the pre-work and prep work we did, I really feel like that paid off in the process and in the bracket that we put out. So I was really happy with that and the work of the committee. So I thought it made yesterday, it was still a very long day, right? But, we wrapped up last night around 11, which was much earlier than in years past.
Yeah, pretty impressive. We were not done at 11. We were done with your side of things by 11, but we weren't done overall by 11. So I would love to know what that experience is like. So please tell me in the future if you don't mind.
Will do, but you did too. So if you put us and men back to back, we're not done by 11.
No, I get that. So I'm curious. We'll get into some nitty gritty here because I think there's a lot of it that we found fascinating, but at the same time, there's a lot of it that we have still questions about. First and foremost, you said the prep work made a big difference. That's great to hear. But in general, what do you think was the biggest challenge you guys faced when you're doing the selections? What was the biggest challenge you were facing when getting down to the end?
I mean, I think it's just so hard, right? All those teams on the board at that moment when you got 2 or 3 spots left are probably deserving, right? And I think the most difficult part is that we have 10 individuals. So we see those resumes a little bit differently. And, you have to remember that we want to try to stay consistent with the way we were looking at resumes at the start of the process. But I feel like once you get at the end, we're really splitting hairs on some things. We're diving into, they're 21-6, and I know that question's coming, but who are those losses to? Are some of the other teams on the board, do they have losses to unranked opponents? Are there head-to-heads on the board? Is there any common opponents on the board? Which is less likely when we're comparing teams across regions, but sometimes that's the case. And so is there head-to-head that's keeping a team below another team when you're looking at the whole body of work? So I think it's really hard. At one point, I think yesterday, someone said, do you feel like you have the happiness of 18 to 22-year-old student athletes in your hands? And, I chuckled because I was that student athlete 2 years, and we were a bubble team both years, and 1 year we got in and 1 year we didn't get in. And so I know what that's like. It's also hard because really, if they win their AQs or, they're not in our hands. So it's tough, right? There's 19 spots and there's so many deserving teams. But I think we did a good job and we stayed consistent with the process.
Yeah, I mean, the one at-large that we missed was Wartburg. We picked Randolph-Macon. I'll admit, I wasn't gung-ho about the Macon pick, but that's where we ended up, and that's where we went. I don't think there was anything overwhelming by that. I see where the Wartburg one was. The one thing that we did struggle a little bit was they were 1-6 versus regionally ranked opponents, and granted, their 6 losses happened to be those 6 regional ranked losses. It wasn't like they had more losses hiding somewhere. So curious, what did you all evaluate that maybe we didn't or didn't appreciate, especially about those regionally ranked opponents? Because honestly, we saw the one win and we said, okay, great. You played a bunch of regionally ranked teams, but you only got one win out of this.
Yeah, I think, the one thing when you guys had them on the board, they also had the highest win-loss percentage. So
correct.
They had a 584 SOS. They had the highest win-loss percentage on the board, and all of their losses came to ranked opponents. Also, again, it's not a scheduling contest. I heard that comment, like I said that a couple weeks ago, and we still took them. They beat a number 2. They had losses to Scranton, who was in our top 4 overall. They 2 to a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5. And so, again, you're not giving them credit for stepping out on the floor with those teams. But when you're looking at some other teams who may have a lower win-loss percentage, right, and not all of their losses have come to ranked opponents. And again, there was some teams on the board late that had 3 ranked wins to a 7, and a 7 in Region 9 is not a 7 necessarily in other regions. And so you also have to dig into a little bit, not just, we have 3 ranked wins or 3 over a 4. What's that 4's SOS? What's that 4's win-loss percentage? What's their resume look like? And when we get to those last few spots, that's what we're doing. And ultimately it comes down to a vote. So we were pretty consistent, I would say, and unanimous, probably on our first 15. And then it's, we're valuing different things, and we're having lots of discussions, and we could probably argue till 2 a.m. about teams, and at some point you just have to make some decisions. And again, a lot of them were very well deserving, and it's hard.
I'm disappointed you didn't argue till 2 a.m., Megan. I don't understand what the problem was.
I was hoping for a good bracket. That's what the problem was.
No, I hear that entirely. We'll get to that in a moment because I do want to talk about the fascination of the bracket. All right, so I totally understand and I can appreciate the fact that I don't want to say that losses are evaluated more, but more than we were, put it that way. And of course, as you said, not every region makes sense. So I get it. And again, I think we're splitting hairs a little bit even ourselves trying to figure out. And I think
I can't
maybe
remember who said it, but I'm pretty sure someone said, I wouldn't even be surprised if they took Wartburg when you guys were
someone
talking
did say
about
it. Yep, someone did say. And honestly, I think that's what we say every time we get to the last pick. It's like, I mean, seriously, they could take any one of these for for all we know. With some of the other aspects of it, first off, you didn't have a lot of bubble bursts, so you did get to go that deep. Is there anything about the process, especially from the last few years that you've been doing it, that when you look back on, you wish you could just get a little bit better definition, understanding, parameters on? Does that make sense? Like, is there anything that's just too open to interpretation?
I mean, I think the criteria is set up in a way when we start to compare teams across regions, it's very difficult, and we get those bookend issues with win-loss and strength of schedule, and it's really hard to evaluate resumes that are very lopsided in one of those categories. And oftentimes with a lopsided SOS, you're going to have some results versus ranked, right? So now it looks like, again, we're not counting categories, we're not counting columns, but now they have good results versus regionally ranked and strong SOS. And how does that stack up to a team that's, again, I say middle of the pack? We had a lot of 550s SOSs, and that's really good. We just had a lot of really strong SOSs this year. And so, how does that stack up when you're looking at almost a 600, with some impressive ranked wins, but the win-loss. So I just think that's challenging to evaluate because there's so much subjectivity with 10 members of the national committee and trying to evaluate what that looks like.
Talking with Meg Wilson here. She's I don't have the full title for you, but we'll trim it down to Associate Dean for Intercollegiate Athletics at Dubuque, but she's also the women's basketball chair. I know I'm missing about half of your title there.
You're good.
And I hope I didn't give you a pay decrease because of it.
Maybe.
Yeah, right. Also women's basketball chair. Megan, real quick before I forget, are you in your last season?
I have one more year on the committee left. I'm in like my umpteenth year because I finished off Dave Petroff, who was actually my old assistant coach at Stevens Point. I finished his term, and then I was re-up for my own term. So I've been on, I think, for 6 years. People are probably really looking forward to me moving on. But I won't be the chair next year. So we do have kind of a 2-year chair, I don't know, situation,
moratorium,
I guess. So so I think I'll have the easy job. I'll just get to sit back and relax next year if I'm staying on.
We have suggestion. I don't know if you heard the end of the last segment. Pat suggested maybe you could be the new liaison. I thought ombudsman for this process, maybe for multiple committees. We've enjoyed having you on, but also we've enjoyed the process that the women have evolved to. So just a thought. We have some higher aspirations for you.
Well, I love it. I mean, I love being a part of this process. I think that I would love to serve on a men's sport committee in some capacity at some point. I just really enjoy it. And it's definitely a good connection for me to the game. I got out of coaching a little bit earlier than I would have anticipated, and so it's just a really good connection to women's basketball and basketball in general for me.
I like how you put that, earlier than anticipated. Let's pivot back. Again, it seemed the selections were pretty obvious to some degree. When you got to bracketing and you talked about a lot of the work you guys did ahead of time, how much was that? And I get the sense that came from the men, because the men have been talking about doing the work ahead of time for years now. How much impact did that have on bracketing? Because I'll admit, this is probably the most, I don't want to use creative, isn't the right word, but the most variety we've seen in a bracket.
Yeah, I think so. Talking with Mike and working closely with Mike and now Sarah this year, and quite honestly, taking some of the feedback that we got as a committee last year in my role as a chair, I think, it's hard to hear some of the criticisms, right? Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it makes you better, and it helps us put together a better tournament. So sure. I think we really listened to some of those things and tried to really create as much of a national tournament as we can in Division III and try to push the envelope and get creative with some of these matchups. And so I think that the shell of the bracket, having a lot of that work done, we had a good idea on our top 16 teams. We knew that geography would play a part. And so even some of those, especially towards the, 14, 15, 16 may not be able to host because of, what it looked like first and second rounds, or maybe even next rounds, and protecting our top 4 overall seeds. So we had to think about those things. But I felt like because last night it was just about making switches once we had our selections in, we were able to put a lot more thought into the creativity and the matchups and where we might be able to send teams to. So I felt very relaxed by the time we got to the bracketing, which maybe sounds crazy, but I was just sitting there watching the screen and hover over teams and seeing where we could put them. And it was just really fun. We talked about, I remember a comment from your show. I don't even remember who said it, but that we didn't get a lot of diversity of regions and pods. And so we really tried, there's some that have a couple per region in the pod, but there's quite a few that have 4 separate regions represented in a pod, and we tried to do some of that stuff. So we'll see. We're trying some new things. We're trying to get better. Some of it is we're working more closely with the men's side of things. I think they've had some good ideas, and I think that collaboration has helped them share some of their ideas, and while still kind of making it our own tournament. So I think it's been good. We have some staggered start times. We've had, it'll be interesting to see what we hear about that in terms of feedback, but, it's good for our game. And that's what we're really trying to do is, just create some excitement. It's such an amazing experience to be a part of a national tournament as a Division III student athlete. And we really want to make them feel that.
To that point, we'll start there. Staggered starts. That was a nice little surprise in there. You guys didn't really allude to that. Have you received any feedback initially on that idea? And because I get the sense that those staggered starts are now more committee controlled than they are institutionally controlled.
Yeah, so we always had parameters for the earliest and latest start times available. But the problem is everybody would kind of go with the 5 and 7:30 or the traditional, when the host got to select. So like the men, we did assign the times. We tried to be cognizant of our top seeds. We tried to be aware of time zone differentials when we looked at those. And, we had to go from half-hour increments to 15-minute increments in a few spots. So games didn't start too late. But we've heard some feedback. There's some concern about the turnaround time, and we tried to really keep it close to 24 hours, and I hope it's good. I just think it gives people an opportunity to see a lot of great basketball. There are so many pods that are going to be so fun to watch, and selfishly for me, right? Our committee is so invested in this tournament now. We are fans of everybody. It's so fun to. Maybe not fun to read some of the fans' Twitter tweets out there right now, but, we're fans of a lot of these teams. We have talked about them. We have researched them. We have watched them now. And so when we get stuck just being able to watch 2 games at a certain, at an hour, it's nice for us to be able to kind of enjoy this too. So I really hope that people go out and watch some great women's basketball and get on games and just see what good talent there is out there in Division III.
No, I agree with you. You guys got really creative with the bracket. You made some flights. You also got the Texas pod. We'll get back to the Texas pod in a minute, but you got some flights. Whitman's heading to Chicago, for example. You've got some other creative spots. You talked about wanting to And thanks for listening to the show and taking advice. We have other ideas if you'd like them, but
I listen.
Which is both very honored and scared all at the same time. There's an element that you did look for the diversity, and I think some things ended up. I liked for example, NYU. It was known, NYU stated it publicly, they weren't going to be hosting this weekend or this tournament. And you guys took advantage of that, put them in a spot where you could get other schools to them. But it looked like you also treated them still as the top seed. It felt like it was a gift and something you did on consciously at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. We tried to protect those top seeds, and they truly are. They're already have to travel because they weren't able to put in a bid to host due to their facility issues and some other stuff. So they weren't going to host. We thought we should still treat them as the seed that we had given them in terms of the overall bracket. So we did that. I think there's some close ones when you kind of look at it. It's not seeded like a traditional Division I bracket would be, where you can count up your 60. It's different because of geography, right? So there's going to be a couple tough first round matchups, but goodness, at this time of year, everybody that's going to be in there, right, is going to be a tough game. You just never know. So I thought the bracket was fun, creative. I think it created some new matchups, and it didn't feel so regionally based as it has maybe in the past.
You did get played into that Texas pod, but you flew Redlands in there. But you've got a little bit of a playful game, which we saw coming, I think, for some of us, Trinity, Texas, and Texas Dallas. Former assistant coach at Trinity and his alma mater is the head coach at Texas Dallas. But Hardin Simmons is in there. Were you able to could you try and get them out of the way there in that Texas area, or were you kind of hamstrung a little bit?
We were pretty hamstrung because Whitman and Redlands were going to be a flight regardless. And we've really, that Texas pod is disappointing every year, right? I just wish we had more flexibility with it. But I think that we were strategic in the way we place teams to protect our top seeds moving forward. So I think we anticipated some things that might happen in next weekend. And so we tried to be really aware of flying and who we were sending where. So we probably could have gotten away with it, although I don't know if we would have been able to do the things we're hopeful that we've done for next weekend.
I was going to say, I'll get to second weekend in a minute. I don't want to leave our first weekend conversation just yet. I'll get to second weekend. Okay. Smith, it seems like you consider them to be the top dog in the entire tourney. You've got Christopher Newport seemingly as the number 2, with Scranton and NYU as the others. If this was a traditional bracket, is that a fair way of saying it?
It's fair.
Okay. How important was it you talked a lot about protecting your seeds. Do you think you were successful in doing so?
I do. I think we did a good job with that this year. I don't think we've always done that in the past.
It's interesting because, and I say this from the segment we just did because I think it was a fascinating point. You see Christopher Newport, Hope, Trinity, and Tufts all in the same grouping in the upper right. And at first you look at that and go, oh, Lord, wowzer. But Scott Peterson pointed out, based on criteria, that's actually not that unreasonable.
Yeah. I've seen a couple tweets about that already, or a Tufts Hope matchup in the third round, not Tufts, Christopher Newport Hope matchup in the third round, and absolutely. But I love Scott. Scott has had my back a little bit, but he's right. When you look at the criteria, they're pretty even quadrants, with Smith probably having a little bit of an advantage. But again, we can talk about things going to chalk next weekend, or even out of game one, and just on the men's side in conference tournaments, we've seen that that's not the case. And so you kind of set the bracket up like that, but who knows what'll happen.
So that upper right hand quadrant for the following weekend is set up you're going to have 3 flights. Now, granted, we're talking about chalk, but even when you look outside the chalk, even if there were a couple upsets, there's probably going to be multiple flights there. First off, that was approved. And in years past, we don't always get to see that. And the second part of that is, did you build it to protect Christopher Newport, knowing that they couldn't necessarily, or they are allowed to host, I should say. They're not going to host the first weekend, but they're in position to host the second weekend. Or is that wide open on who can host that second weekend?
No, I think we did it to protect them. Obviously, their men will have priority next weekend, so that could be challenging, and that may tie our hands a little bit. But again, I think one of the reasons we were able to put the bracket together the way we did was because we did limit those first round of flights to just 2. And so I think generally we've had at times more than that. And so this was the route we chose to go, and we tried to protect those top 4.
Well, when you can go that route and still have the creativity in the bracket, it looks good. I mean, I think we'd be having a different conversation if you chose to just go with 2 flights that first weekend and have them all in the second. If we have nothing but regionalized brackets, to some degree, you're able to be creative and get everything you wanted in one bracket.
Yeah, and again, I think a lot of that had to do with us being more prepared and just make those decisions last night. We had a shell. We were pretty good, our bracketing crew, on who we thought our selections would be based on our committee votes when we selected those. So we had some switches, but not a lot. So we were able to just last night start moving teams around in pods and starting to kind of look at some of those matchups.
How many people do you have involved with it this year?
So last night we had 4 committee members and our 2 liaisons from the NCAA. So there were 6 of us.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
Where did you guys have the biggest hang up the entire day? Was it in the selections? Was it in bracketing? Where was the challenge that you faced when you had to deal with things?
I would say just those last 5 picks. There's just so much subjectivity at that point. And so they took us a long time. Now, granted, our first 10, we were very well prepared for, and we had done some stuff that we kind of were able to show our committee, look, you guys know, you've been talking about these teams all year, you know they're going to be in the tournament. So those went a lot faster. But when we got to those last 5, it became difficult. And, again, you have 10 different opinions, and you have, coaches that have played these teams. And so, you just feel like you're talking in circles, right? Like, yeah, but this team has done this. And, it's like, we just heard you say that, but it's just tough. So I would say that was probably the most difficult thing. I know you'll probably love to hear me say this, but it's just really hard with Sunday championship games. And so I know the weather played a huge impact for some, but it really does. Again, they're doable, they're allowed, they're accepted, but it does make the work of the committee a little bit more challenging.
Would it be better if they were earlier or just not there at all?
I think it'd be better if they just weren't there at all. If I had my perfect world, there would be none. I think the part you run into if they were earlier is we do our rack calls first, and we have to do all those scenarios, and then games play, and then we start the national. So we start with the regions who have finished up, but I would just prefer them not to be on Sunday at all.
Yeah, well, as you said, I didn't mind hearing that at all.
Yeah.
And whatsoever. By the way, I may have gotten my wording confused. I meant to say that the women have first priority the weekend coming up. It's the men who have the priority the second weekend. I was trying to say that because of that CNU pod, you have choices everywhere to go, and I jumbled up my language there.
Yep.
On what I was trying to say there, and leave open the possibility that if the women or the Christopher Newport men are not hosting, you can still go there with the women. So you still got the possibility. It's kind of where I was trying to go, and my brain just took it sideways and went all over the place with it. Did the fact that this is a Dallas championship have any impact on anything, or is that completely outside the realm of worry in terms of budgets, flights, and all that?
As far as I'm concerned, that was completely out of not in our realm. It was not in our thought process as a committee. I don't know in terms of from an NCAA level, but I think they're just separate things.
When you look at, or no, better question, what feedback have you gotten today? And I know you've gotten lots, but what's been maybe a couple of the central themes or the biggest questions you've gotten, whether it's administrators, coaches, fans, whatever? What have been the 2 or 3 biggest hot buttons?
I think a lot of people think the system's broken. I think I've seen things that we're just truly not taking the best 64 teams. And I would probably agree with that in the fact that we're definitely not taking the best 64 teams because of AQs. And so we only have 19 at-large selections. And so it's really difficult. There are so many deserving teams, and then you just have so much subjectivity. And not real clear guidelines. I think we've gotten a lot closer. I still think there's similar resumes that probably got in on the men's side possibly and did not get in on our side. And so you're going to see some of those complaints out there. But I really felt like we were pretty consistent all year with where we were at as a committee. And I think that's one of the challenges, right, is now when people roll off the committee, how does that change? Or, for instance, I've been the chair for 2 years, and probably some consistency when you get a chair for multiple years. How does that change? Because now the leader, the voice of the group has maybe different values or sees win-loss or SOS or ranked results versus ranked different than I do. And so I think it's not a perfect system. I don't think our criteria is set up very well to compare teams nationally across regions. I think it's very regional. And I'm not sure it's the best criteria anyway.
Do you think there's a criteria or some system that we could evolve to over time? Is there something that, does the SOS need to be reworked? Does part of the criteria need to be, this does evolve. It used to be QOWI, and before that, it wasn't anything, to be honest. Where do you think it can evolve to?
I don't know. I would love to see our tournament field put in pairwise this year. I would love to see where pairwise, which is used in men's and women's hockey, and where our teams would have fell in that. I just think that there's a lot of criteria that gets double counted right now. So, for instance, if I beat you head-to-head and you're ranked, I've now got a head-to-head win. That's the results versus ranked, and it's also helped my SOS. So now that one game has now pushed me in 3 categories, and win-loss because I beat you. So
to some degree,
how much credit are we going to give that win? And when you have a head-to-head win and it's a ranked win, are you counting that against the team that lost twice? Meaning they lost the head-to-head and the results versus ranked aren't as good. You know what I'm saying? If it's close.
Yeah. Okay. Quickly
I'm not a math girl. So I don't know where it could get. I wish
I
it
just
could
know
get
that
better.
Technically, if you beat a team, it doesn't hurt your SOS because that game isn't put into the SOS because you don't want to hurt your number because you beat them type thing. But I know what your point is.
I just mean if you're regionally ranked, you're probably a progressive seed. Yeah.
My question, you bring up pairwise. I've heard rumblings about this. We know it's on the ice hockey side of things. I don't fully understand pairwise, but I have heard rumblings that it's being mixed and bantied and whatever you want to say within Division III. Do you have an understanding of what pairwise is and exactly how it measures, and outside of hockey, how it would measure in basketball? What's its role? How does it work?
I don't know enough to be able to speak intelligently on it. I do know that there is no guesswork. when I was at UW Stevens Point, our men's hockey team knew right where they sat all year long. So once the tournament came, they knew as soon as that championship game was over if they're in or they're not. And it's just, it takes all the subjectivity out. Now it doesn't really create, then do you need a committee probably to put on a championship? But there's just,
well, there still might be some head-to-head in some of those factors, right?
Yeah, I don't know how, and that's why I think that's where a lot of the questions come in, is because it's a hockey thing right now. How does that look in a sport like basketball or volleyball? And so I think the Champs Committee has said that they're going to run some other sports and tournaments to kind of see, to be able to get feedback from committees. And, I don't think it's anything that's soon, but I think it's worth investigating. I think it's worth looking into.
Do you, as you understand, I appreciate you probably know only a smidge more than I do, and I don't know much about it at all, but and actually I got my math guys chirping on the side a little bit. But my question to you about it is it an RPI type system? Is it taking your win-loss and your strength of schedule and all that, and kind of, the best example I have for anybody in Maine's going to laugh at this, the heel point system in Maine was basically that type of system. Is that what we're looking at, that it's literally a metric that can take all of this criteria we're talking about and spit out and say, here you go?
I'll be honest. They presented on it to us at the Champs meeting in the fall, and I don't know.
Well, that's fine. And listen, that was in the fall. You weren't focused on having that be your next system, so it's not like you had to understand it backwards. And listen, I've even been in hockey and seen how they say, well, those teams in the middle in the no man's land in ice hockey, it doesn't work for them. It doesn't represent them fairly. So I do know there's been criticism of it,
gotcha.
But then it's from their perspective. So is it an accurate? Sure. Is it an accurate criticism? I don't know, and that's. Yep. But again, I've heard the pairwise conversation before, so I find that interesting. And again, things evolve, so maybe that's where this evolves to in the future. Megan, I've had a lot of your time. I really appreciate it. I know you had a long drive back after a long weekend in Indy. I know all you guys were doing was just having nice dinners and enjoying each other's company. Yeah. There wasn't any really hard work out there. Again, championships headed towards Dallas with the semifinals at Trinity, Connecticut prior to that. And thanks for all the time you've given us and all the work and frank answers. Really appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll talk to you again, I'm sure, but hopefully maybe we'll get you on another committee or they talk you into a third year as chair. But in the meantime, we always give the guests the final word. Any final thoughts you want to share with those who might be tuned in?
I just want to thank you, Dave, for having me on for the the Top 16 show. Sure. All the work that you do for Division III, and just congratulations to all the teams. It's such an exciting time of year. So as real as all that excitement is, so is a disappointment to those that didn't get in, and it's probably still tough to swallow, but it's a tough process. And unfortunately or fortunately, we can only select teams based on the criteria that we have. And we really felt like we had some consistency. We felt like we put together a good bracket. We're excited about the staggered start times. We're super excited about a joint championship. So there's just so many great things for D3 women's basketball this year. And I can't wait to watch some good games. Yeah, no, enjoy it. It is going to be exciting. Dallas is going to be great. I can't wait for that experience for those student athletes. As I said earlier in the show, Indianapolis was fun to experience. I think nothing against the men. The women have the great opportunity where all three can be in the same building, and it just has a different feel to it. And I'm looking forward to hearing how that all turns out. Thanks again for the time. Appreciate it. Take care of yourself. Get some rest, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Dave. Megan Wilson joining us on the Hudl Hoopsville Hotline. Appreciate her time. Listen, I don't think there's a lot to quibble about on the women's side. Yeah, we selected someone other than Wartburg, but I didn't see a major problem with why Wartburg did get in versus somebody else. And listen, gave us good answers on that. Sometimes we'll get a committee chair come on and go, well, I can't really tell you why we chose that. She flat out did. And credit to Megan for doing so. We'll take a break. When we come back, I believe we're going to get Sarah Quadracki on to talk about the men's team. I think she is finally back from her travels.
We'll get her on and then wrap up the show after that. But by the way, Pairwise mentioned in that conversation. I have definitely been hearing rumblings about Pairwise for a little bit of time. It has not been something I could definitely talk on because it's not a reality. But I do know it's been presented. I do know it's been a conversation. And from what I'm hearing, a lot of the sports committees in Division III want it. Interestingly enough, I think some of the bigger ones are a little bit leery, but not in bad reason. I think they want to understand how it truly measures, because God forbid we walk down that road, get into it, and be halfway through, and all of a sudden somebody says, this isn't measuring things right. This isn't doing what we wanted to, and now we're selecting teams based on a criteria that doesn't work. So I understand being leery. You want to make sure the system is accurate. All right, so we'll take a break. Like I said, we'll be back. Hopefully Sarah Quadracki will join us. We'll try and answer some of your questions as well. You listen to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com and Sport Tours International from the WBCA NABC Studios. Actually, before I go, I should definitely, hold on. I want to give the NABC some credit. We did not do enough of it on the show last night, and that is my fault. So we're going to give them a little bit of love here as we speak. The National Association of Basketball Coaches is the nation's premier professional development and advocacy organization for basketball coaches at every level. The NABC strives to serve as the voice of coaches on national issues while advancing the core values of leadership, service, advocacy, education, and inclusion. To learn more about the NABC and to become a member, visit nabc.com and follow the NABC on social media at NABC 1927. That's NABC 1927. We'll take another break. Be back in a bit.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's nearly 850 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over 2 decades. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
It's on us. It's on all of us. And it's time to act now.
It's on us to start the change. It's on us to be the change. It's on us. It's on Division III. It's on all of us to stop sexual assault.
I learned a lot of valuable lessons playing college football. I never thought about the health benefits of exercise until I actually started to talk to coaches in college. It's not only just for performance, it's for life. My coaches instilled the importance of well-being, not only building up strength, mental health, getting enough sleep, eating properly is all what it is to be healthy. I decided that I want to go on a personal trainer and share my knowledge that I obtained in college about physical and mental well-being.
Coach of the Year, Administrator of the Year, All-America Team, Wade Trophy. The WBCA doesn't just honor coaches, but players, administrators, and much more. The WBCA strives to honor those who have contributed to the advancement of women's basketball. Celebrate the present, honor the past, look to the future.
And once again, our thanks to the NABC and the WBCA for their support. Also, big thanks to Sport Tours International. We talk about missing out on the tournament and maybe improving your resume. Sport Tours International and D3Hoops.com have this wonderful event in Las Vegas called the D3Hoops.com Classic. It's an annual event at South Point Casino and Hotel and their wonderful arena. If you want to improve your resume, give us a call. We'll get you in touch with Sport Tours International, our good friends who put on that event with us. and we will get you to Vegas, whether it's next year or the year after. Oswego men are coming next year, for example. It will help your resume, and we hope it'll help you not have that situation of missing out on the tournament because of it. Reminder, we have our fundraiser going, closing in on getting to our goal, but we're not quite there yet, so help us out. Venmo information on the screen. Also, Give Butter information. If you want to send a check or you want to send via Zelle, like a bank transfer, let us know. We'll send you that information as well. All right, let's talk men's committee now. Sarah Quadracki has been traveling all day and avoiding me at all costs, which I don't blame her. You don't really want to deal with me sometimes, but joining us on the Hudl Hoopsville Hotline is the aforementioned Quadracki of the Sarahs. And Sarah, I'll start off with this, other than you avoiding my phone calls today. I am curious about something. Why were we right and you were wrong in the selections?
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, I know. I'm just...
What?
No, I figured I'd give it a whirl. I see if maybe we could get it.
No.
When it came down to the end, one thing we said on the show, and I know you probably didn't hear it, we mentioned it a bit last night, and you were probably traveling today. One thing I mentioned was this year seemed much more difficult. Maybe that's what you were alluding to when we were chatting prior to the show, and you threw out the gauntlet that we couldn't hit 20 out of 20. Thanks so much for that. Was because of all of the bubble bursts, all the bid thieves. We didn't notice until the end when we were done talking about resumes and we looked at last year's resumes of who was still at the table. That bar moved way up in terms of win-loss percentage, SOS, and all of that. There were teams sitting on that table that would have been long gone last season.
Yeah, and I think, besides avoiding you at all costs today, Dave, today's been really tough because unlike years past, I think it's pretty obvious there was probably a dozen teams today that all in their hearts believed that they were our 65th team. And that's really hard to swallow as our committee. And, that's tough. So, that's not easy for any of us to deal with because and that's what I was trying to point out yesterday. Like, that's why it was going to get hard because there was a grouping of teams that because of all those bubbles, we just knew it was going to go like this until kind of that very end. And then we were just going to have this gauntlet of teams and it was going to be like, oh my gosh, we only have to select, I'm not going to tell you how many, but there was only a few that we could select out of this robust amount of teams. And they all had very similar resumes. Like they all had something, right? One had more RROs, one had the highest SOS, one had a winning percentage. And like, that is so hard. And we're not just like sitting here, just like having fun in the room and discussing all of this. We're like, we know that that's the hopes and dreams of everybody that's out there. And that won 22 games or 25 games or, whatever that is. And so it's not a fun exercise. And we knew that it was going to come down to some really hard decisions. And so, and that's what I think, that's what I was trying to allude to. Yes, I think, was that just yesterday? Yeah, just yesterday when we were on, that it was going to be really hard to choose those last couple teams because we had 10 people voting. I knew our committee was not going to be able to vote unanimously the 64th team.
Yeah.
I knew that. We weren't going to be able to come to a conclusion because that all of us were going to be like, yes, that's the last team. That's the last team. And it just was like a really weird fit because unlike years past where like we talk and talk and talk and talk and then we just vote, this year we just kept talking and no one wanted to vote. And it was because we just knew there was so many, it was like, but there's all these teams. And so I think that's what's been the hard part this year. Today, especially today seems like Black Monday, right? It's like, oh my gosh, it's so exciting for our bracket and all of this, but like, it also feels like a very somber day for some just because, we know that we couldn't take as many teams as possible. And at the end of the day, I heard some of Megan's, they have 19 at larges. We have 20. That is very difficult.
Well,
very,
technically
very
they have
difficult.
20 with a Pool B, but yeah. I mean, the Pool B is kind of a
Yeah,
check
yeah,
mark, but
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that's very hard. So when, we're seeing comments like you didn't take the best teams, we know that there's still really good
Yeah.
teams out there. We know that there's still good teams out there that, aren't going to go to basketball practice tomorrow, that they're not preparing. And that's what's really hard about our process. It's not fair, the criteria, but like, this is how we are. Like, it's a regionalized process, but we say it's a national bracket.
Yeah. Well,
okay. So, and that's
true in a lot of things.
Like, yeah. And I mean, we didn't make it up. Like, we didn't all sit in a room and make this up over the last year. And, the student athletes, hear, they only hear what's happening on their campus. And I think it's very important to realize, like, we didn't just like not choose somebody because we didn't think they were good enough. We know they were good enough to be in the tournament. It's just there was only so many spots. So I think that's just what's been so difficult. So but yeah, I mean, if we want to talk bracket, let's talk bracket. I think our bracket this year, obviously you all have seen the bracket. I think it was well worth the wait. Yeah, we had a little bit of wait. I didn't get my 10,000 tweets. I was really hoping to get the 10,000 tweets from the D3.
You didn't come close.
Yeah, I was just going to start live tweeting this sucker out. I was just going to go pod by pod. And I was just going to start in the middle and have people ask, like, oh, I wonder what seed this is. But no, our bracket, this year is so heavily centered in the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, and that Ohio area. And so it made bracketing a little bit tougher than normal.
Let me. I got some questions on bracketing, but I do want to circle back. I know you're trying to avoid it, but I do want to just quick question.
I can still avoid, Dave. You can ask them.
You can avoid, but at least Megan answered some questions.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, Megan answered them.
Well,
listen, we selected Rochester. And I had a whole soliloquy about why I had trouble with it because the SOS seemed to be pulling so hard in another direction. How, as a committee chair, when you take, I'm going to do this in a different way. As a committee chair, when you take questions from coaches, administrators, et cetera, and there is this conversation about SOS and win-loss and all of that, admittedly, I know a vast majority of Division III schools, they can't get the schedule Rochester gets. And some of that was maybe a little bit of dumb luck, and some of it is the fact that the conference rose to the occasion this year, too. There's a lot of factors. But how do you balance a conversation with those individuals to explain, yes, you need to improve your SOS, but we understand you can't get all the way there. And so we pick a school that is a unicorn, that is very difficult for anybody to achieve. What's that conversation like to try and explain to those who just can never achieve that?
Yeah, that one, it's tough. We can talk about Rochester for the whole off season, and that's scheduled. But at the end of the day, they went out. Coach went out and scheduled. He knows the ins and outs of this process better than anybody. And he went out and he manufactured an SOS. But he won the games that probably got him in the tournament. I mean, he had more games than just his conference RROs. So a lot of people want to knock UAA schools, but Rochester had wins in that RRO column that they went out and played in the non-conference schedule against other regions across the country. They traveled, they hosted tournaments, they brought teams to them. And, at the end of the day, they had the most in the country. And they, I don't know,
Would there have been a point where they weren't considered?
Yeah, probably.
They get dangerously close to that point?
Probably.
Yeah. I was just curious. Because I think we do see sometimes teams at 500 who have godly SOS numbers and they're never considered. And I was wondering how close do we get to that point?
I mean,
where you pull the ripcord.
Since I've been on the committee, we've had at least one of these teams every year, where we go round and round and round and round. But this one was different because of the highest in those two categories. And I know that that's hard to consume for some people because of the winning percentage. And a lot of people say, well, you still have to win the games. They did win the hardest of their games. But
one would also argue, just for devil accuracy, they also lost some of those.
They did.
They beat Case. They also lost a Case.
Yeah, they did.
Just for devil, that was part of my argument last night was yes, I agreed. And I mentioned it on the selection show. It might be a second-round matchup against Middlebury. That might have been the game that helped them get in.
I did. I saw that comment, yeah.
I mean, it's fair. And again, I don't want to go round and round. I thought Bob had some great points about it earlier today. We don't need to go down that drain too far because I think the point's been made. Let's pivot to bracketing.
Yeah.
Wow. I am going to start with this one. Have you gotten any pushback for sending the SCIAC teams all the way to the East Coast?
Not yet, and I'll tell you why. I mean, we were really, really hampered with very few schools that could host in the Midwest, with a lot of teams that we couldn't move around. And that's another thing, we can't manufacture flights where we just want to manufacture flights, right? Exactly. So it's not that people tell us what we can do with flights, but we can't just manufacture a flight. And so I'm sure we'll talk about the Texas pod at some point.
Just writing something down about that.
We were really, really hampered with we just had a cluster of these Midwest teams and where we were going to put in the central of the, another thing we did was really try to stay true to trying to mix in the region. So we actually have this tool that we use, the spreadsheet, where we log in the regional ranks for the teams and get a cumulative score for each pod, and then for each section, and then each side of the bracket. We obviously don't, release that. I mean, you all could do that on your own too if you wanted to at the end of the day. But that's how we kind of try to balance out, things. And so we really were trying to do that. There was a couple that we just got stuck in. Okay. But that's how we were really trying to make this puzzle work. But it's a great tool to kind of really, help us, make a difference in moving around these regions. But that's how we start building the bracket, is moving around teams, try to get different regions, involved in these pods. And so it was just really tough, with some of the upsets, and not being able to fly a team into Texas. That hurt. And then obviously flying teams, you always want to fly them to a major airport. And then when we slowly started filling up the Midwest type pods, we had all these open spots on the East Coast near major airports. And so to try to balance out some matchups and not try to make, just crazy matchups either, where we're putting, two lower seeds, against each, that type of, mix, that's just kind of where it ended up. We also, we're always kind of, and this is no dig at an Emory, but we're always kind of used to having an Emory pod. So that was always another kind of southern location. We didn't have that one in play this year. And that always kind of helped us that was always kind of our gap from the, that the two regions, and we just didn't have that this year. And so there was just a lot of things at play that, that we just, we really just tried to maneuver. And like I said, the Texas pod, once it became 4 Texas teams, it was Like,
yeah, I was wondering. Shriner kind of threw a monkey wrench into that
and like,
I mean, and that's
good,
not a
like,
knock on him.
yeah,
Great
like,
job.
good for them. But
Yeah.
once it became 4 Texas teams, it was like, oh no, like,
Yeah, you've got
and
no
that's
choice.
the thing where I was saying, like, we can't manufacture a flight because that would then become 2, like, so, you know,
Yeah, that 1 becomes 2.
yeah, and I think that's what people need to understand. Like, I hate, like, I'll say, like, I hate that pod. I don't think any of us wanted that pod. I mean, everybody hates that pod, you know. But I hope that we sell that place out. I hope that becomes a great place. I hope that's a great environment. I hope we turn that on. You know, and we've got 2 Texas teams having a great environment on Saturday night. You know, Mary Hardin Baylor, whoever it is. I mean, I hope that becomes, and we just kind of turn it into a positive. Maybe that's what I'm hoping, because they're all right there.
But curious about it, because the regional rankings have come out.
Yeah.
St. Thomas is 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mary Hardin Baylor's 2.
We've already had discussions. And you know, I haven't talked to them. Our regional rep and Region 10 has. But that's a part of the discussion that we had since we had 4 Texas teams. They're all within, you know, it's like 280 miles, with very large fan bases. We're hoping that's going to be a really great experience.
So it was more about maybe a size of facility be able to maximize the opportunity for fans.
Yeah.
That's not always on front and center, but I can understand it. We know that St. Thomas is a bit on the small side, and we know Mary Hardin Baylor's got a sizable facility. Now, would you consider moving it to the football stadium?
Hey,
just a thought.
They want to sell that out. Let's.
Oh, if they sold that out, you better move it to the football stadium, and that will pay for the next 5 tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that was going to bring some question, and you know, I know Doc and their administration had a conversation today, and I know that, you know, that was probably hard, but you know, and we can work through that. But you know, that was a unanimous decision by our committee.
Interesting. I appreciate that. Thank you for that info. Pomona Pitzer at Williams, or not at Williams, I apologize. Pomona Pitzer playing Williams, being at St. Joseph. That's one of an example of a lot of things going on. 1, you're flying a SCIAC team to the West Coast. 2, you kind of have a little fun there with some really good academic institutions. And 3, St. Joseph's being rewarded, despite the loss at the end there, for the season that they had. And you're bringing in Chatham as well. Tell me a little bit, is a microcosm of everything else. Is that just the idea of, again, that math first, of trying to make sure you have a pod that's equal, but second, trying to be as creative as possible and find as many options as you can within the guidelines?
Yep. Try to find as many options. Also, I don't think it's a secret there. You know, we were trying, we had to get really creative. If you look through all of our other 3 pods, all of those 3 pods, the second weekend becomes, you know, pretty clear on where people can go. That pod, you know, we would, if
that one's wide open.
Christopher Newpart could not host this first round because of the women have priority. So we've kind of set that up to where if they should come out of that pod, then they would have the priority to host in the second weekend.
We asked Megan this, that Christopher Newport pod at Hampden-Sydney almost seemed like a gift with the fact that they couldn't host. In hers, it was NYU. Couldn't host. You could send it to Messiah. That allows Greensboro to enter the equation and have a great little matchup there. You've got Christopher Newport being able to take on Farmingdale State, but you get Emory to Hampden-Sydney, but that also looked like it puts you in a pickle. Because if you're going to protect your seed, you get Farmingdale State, which, by the way, I'm surprised was 500 miles, but I haven't checked it myself. But then you get this Hampden-Sydney Emory battle. That didn't seem ideal, but it feels like that one you got pigeonholed in.
We got stuck there. So that was one of the pods. We had 2 pods where we couldn't mix the regions. That was one of them. And then our other one was the Wheaton pod where we only had 2 regions represented. We had a Region 8 and Region 9 there, and that's just because we got stuck with teams. So those were our only two where it's just because of Emory was the outlier there. We were really close to, unfortunately, having to fly them, but Hampton City was the only place they can get to. And then that was the closest place we could allow for Christopher Newport to go to host for them and protect the seat, to kind of have a seated type, game for them. And then obviously, that first Shark game with Farmingdale State. So, but yeah, I mean, that one, I think it's already been said. I've seen it somewhere, that would be 3 flights, but it'd be 3 flights into Christopher Newport. So,
well, right. Right. Unless something were to drastically change, it definitely feel like you were kind of setting
not,
it up.
then it's kind of wide open. And then it's kind of wide open. We'll fly somewhere else, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, that one's our wild card. I mean, our only charge is to, deal with the flights in the first round, and then you can't predict games. So we have to fly out,
Was WashU geography?
What's up?
Was WashU a geography decision? Because they're behind North Park in the rankings, it looked like because Sewanee can get, again, same conversation, Sewanee can get to WashU, you set it up for geography.
Yeah.
Okay, with that in mind.
The only place, that's the only place that Sewanee could get to.
Yep. With that in mind, Oswego. Is that a geography equation where you can get Albertus Magnus and John Carroll there, or did John Carroll actually play themselves out of a host by losing in the semifinals?
Well, yeah, they finished 3rd in the region.
Okay. Good point. I forgot about the 3rd in the region part. But at the same time, again, it feels like it filled in a geography opportunity for you.
It did.
Were you worried about rematches too early? Rochester Middlebury is one that jumps out. Obviously, you had the Texas one.
Yeah. There's a couple that we could see in the second rounds, but we had a couple last year too, in the second rounds. But again, we can't predict, can't necessarily predict those either. So
yeah, no, I can appreciate that. I just was mainly curious on how it all played out. Listen, there's a lot to dive into and a lot that's fascinating. I'm sure you've taken lots of phone calls, answered most of them, not all of them. I'm kidding. Staggered times. Mm-hmm. Every 15 minutes, obviously on purpose. Did you get any pushback from anybody about those?
Like the host, you mean?
Yeah, like hosts are worried about turnaround time or anything like that, or is everybody at this point pretty much know that's how this works?
Yeah, and that's in their bid. They just have to click that they can host anywhere from
okay
first to the last. Yeah.
So that language has changed a little bit. Got it.
Yeah. We have 4 Central Time hosts, so we gave them the later times and then worked from there.
No, I think it's cool. I'm going to enjoy the heck out of it. We talked to Megan. She brought up the fact we were talking about, she said that this selection process maybe isn't the best. It's certainly better than what we've had. Listen, we all remember, some of us remember the QOWI days and some of us remember the pre-QOWI days. And as we joked with you two ladies, we've definitely moved past the old boys network.
Yeah.
She brought up the fact that maybe there's a way of changing things. She talked about whether pairwise was something that Division III is debating and discussing. From your perspective, is this a system that we can continue to massage and improve and work with, or is there a new system like a pairwise that might be worth putting our toe in the water on?
I mean, I think the Champs Committee is going to choose pairwise regardless of what we think or not.
Fascinating. Okay.
I mean, I think all of us here and, we all, and a lot of us think that, the world just revolves around Division III basketball, right? And there's so many other,
of course.
There's so many,
gosh darn it.
There's so many other sports. And I think, there's so many eyes on us and, this process that we have because we are so we're so transparent in the process. I don't see a lot of other sport chairs, like just getting on and talking about it and taking heat, answering
I
questions.
would love to change that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see this a lot, and so
And we appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think that's why this is so like it's just such a hot topic right now. And look, if they go to if they go to Pairwise, we're gonna have an issue with that too, because now we're gonna be like, the computers got it wrong. This is so horrible. And then they're gonna want the humans step in and make a decision, right?
All right.
The humans have to flip it. And so I haven't seen, I think Megan said, yeah, they did mention it. They never showed us, but then I have heard that maybe they put in our data from last year's tournament, and it was like all but one or something. They didn't tell us which one.
But argumentatively, that just proves you did the same thing the humans did. That doesn't mean it's a better system necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. So I don't know, but it's like, I guess they still put in the same criteria. They're not changing the criteria. Like, I don't think they're changing the criteria at all. I think they're just like maybe putting in the same criteria and letting computers do the work. I don't know. So it's basically like if you were doing it, Dave. So I don't know.
I'm available.
Yeah, so I don't know what they're doing.
Interesting.
But I think they still have committees. I think you and I have talked. It's like this. It'd be like the same as like the only thing I can think of is like when I was on the golf committee, we had golf stats. So like we'd get on our RAC calls and we'd get on our national calls with like, golf stat. It's like, oh, does this look right? Actually, no, there was a head-to-head. So we need to flip these two teams or flip these two women in this, in the individual standings, something like that. So I still think there would be some sort of human element. I don't know. I have no idea.
I would hope I wouldn't mind a system that helps.
Yeah, if it helps, perfect. Yeah.
Right. But I wouldn't want a system that like rubber stamps it. Yeah.
Yeah. If it helped with consistency or
at least maybe a balance of these numbers.
Yeah.
But I don't like the idea that it rubber stamps thing. I'm going to have to dive into it in the off season. I think it'll be something that's going to turn into an off season project a little bit.
I mean, I think it would be better if we just had, if we could just have more teams or bigger bracket or, I don't know.
Then somebody will still complain. You know how this works.
I know.
I thought there was another question, but I've lost it. We've taken enough of your time anyway. If I remember it, we'll maybe ask you off air and get back to you on it and get back to the answer. But I appreciate the time. And I know what it was. Sorry, real quick. From a production perspective, it is a tight turnaround to try, as we explained at the beginning of the show, to get that bracket show on the air, which is why there were problems. You take one hiccup and the window's gone. Is there any talk about changes or at least something to either get games off a Sunday, earlier Sunday, so you can get your work done, so it can be done sooner, or maybe
I don't know. Man, all I'm gonna say is we were done at like 7:45 last night. So
what?
Yeah,
Megan, you should have come on the show and given us the selection, so we could have been perfect.
We could have been. I mean.
So in other words, you sat back and laughed at us the rest of the night.
Yeah, we were done. We were just in there. I was helping Jimbo. We were doing ref assignments. We were hanging out. Like,
any women assigned?
I have a couple surprises. For you, Dave.
Well, this is a perfect place to tell those surprises.
Yeah, you'll see. I got some surprise. I'll have some surprises for you this week. Oh, I got animals going crazy here. I don't know if you can hear
All right.
that, so.
We'll let you go on that then, as long as you give us the surprises.
We'll have a couple. We got a couple more. I am, it wouldn't be my last year on this committee if I didn't have a couple more surprises, heading into this last weekend. So keep
all right.
Yeah, at a couple different locations. We're gonna have a couple different things going on. So
I want to know about them. I'm letting you off the hook with the understanding that you're going to let me know about them.
They will be live on. We won't let NCAA.com break the news, but
thank you.
I'll post it out. Hashtag D3Hoops. I'm sure y'all will get it then.
No. Just give them to me and I'll send them out. Come on. This is how this symbiotic relationship works.
Yeah, we'll have some breaking news on Friday. a couple different locations.
All right. I'll look forward to it.
Good.
Well, thank you. As always, we give the guests the final word, and I suggest you use the final word just to break that news now. But go ahead and use it however you wisely choose.
No, we do. We've got, again, we have 16 great hosts this weekend. I know there's been a lot of ifs, ands, buts, but at the end of the day, we have got 64 teams in the tournament, student athletes with a great opportunity here to have their one shining moment. And in a couple weeks, we are going to have a national champion in Fort Wayne. Fort Wayne is one of the greatest hosts for this championship. We cannot wait to get there. We cannot wait to have our first tip on Friday. Thank you to the D3 basketball committee. Thanks for supporting all that we do. Appreciate you. We love the criticism, the support. We love all the laughs, the smiles, the tweets. We love it all. Maybe next year you'll go 20 for 20 with the computers. I don't know.
Hey, we've done 20 for 20 before. We're capable.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll
usually
be on
we're
the show
able to
with you.
glean more information, which would be helpful.
Yeah, I'll be on the show with you.
I love that.
Yeah, I'll be off the committee.
Hold on, writing it down.
Yeah.
Sarah on mock committee. It is set, folks.
Yep,
We're just gonna have
there
to
you
kick
go.
Bob Quillman or Matt Snyder or somebody else off. No, I'm kidding. We'll bring you in on top of that. No, we'd
All
love
right,
to
I will
have you. We'd
see
love
you
to have
all
former committee
in-
members.
I will see you all in Fort Wayne.
Definitely.
Have a great weekend watching games. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
All right.
Really appreciate the time. Get some rest.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you, Sarah Quadracki, joining us on the Hudl Hoopsville Hotline. We'll get Pat on here in just a moment. In the meantime, I told you we would play our reactionary piece, and we will do so right now. But thanks, by the way, got another donation. Really appreciate that. Our number has gone up. I don't know if we have more. We'll add to the total. But I really want to thank those of you who've contributed. Oh, there is another one, so we're going to have to up the total in the meantime. But we told you there was a reactionary piece from a bunch of those who sent in videos to us about their reactions of teams, whether they knew they were in the tournament or they did not. Sit back and enjoy 5.5 minutes of absolute awasomeness.
Since one of the storied programs on the East Coast is making the NCAA tournament, so it's a great moment to celebrate for an at-large berth here. Hampton Sydney.
Let's go!
Welcome to the field to the Tufts Jumbo. Scheduled the way with Tufts. Barry Washington earns an at-large. Back-to-back champs in the Little East Conference after winning their 6th tournament title and 5th in the last 8 years. Last year they knocked out previous national runner-up in the first round, so they'll be ready for anything, especially against the Baruch title game, punctuated by Devin Nicholson's layup. Northwestern, the AQ, after beating North Central of Minnesota in the Upper Midwest on Sunday. Second ever trip to the AQ. The back trips now to the NCAA. Block shots with the best of them. Emory, an at-large fly. Part of the bracket, it's DeSales who comes in the be played at King State. And that game will be played at King State.
Obviously, we worked hard. It obviously resulted in a home game, and that's great. I think we all know it's not about that, right? We got a job to do. We got 6 games to win. We're going to play our best on back-to-back nights. That's how we went to Indiana. That's what we talked about ever since going out to Swarthmore and losing to Oswego, right? About being our best on back-to-back nights. One opportunity to do it. We played our best game of the season. This weekend, we're playing our best game of the season. I don't care if it's here. Wherever we are, we're playing our best. Back-to-back, 6 times in a row. Let's go. Let's go!
Family on 3, love on 6. 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, 6. Love, Key State.
Pretty cool experience to watch that. Keene State at the end with Ryan Kane alluding to the fact, hey, remember last year we went to Swarthmore, won the first game, and then not so great in the second. It's about every game. Pretty good stuff. Pat Coleman now joining me back on the Hudl Hoopsville Hotline. By the way, thank you to all of you who've contributed. We're officially over $7,000 now on our campaign. Nice. Thanks in part, if you don't mind, sir, to thank you as well. For your
absolutely. I mean, obviously, we support this show in many ways, and financially has been one of them as well. And it seemed like a good time to maybe make good on that annual vague, undefined dollar amount commitment that we generally.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
It's kind of, where does the budget sit in any given year kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that I can appreciate. I know the budget conversations in my home, for example. First and foremost, I thought those were some interesting conversations. Maybe I need to get the chairs on when they're tired a little bit more often.
Well, that's interesting. I always feel like I felt like with Sarah especially, you were just kind of continuing to badger her when I felt like she was tired, and as you said, it's been a long day for both of them. I mean, Dave, you have had tired committee chairs on before and gotten absolutely nothing out of them. I could name names, but I will be polite and not name names. So, did you hear which one that was? But in all seriousness, right? You talked about, them just being transparent with stuff. And we had, we've had similar situations over on the football side of the house. Some years we get good, transparent information. Some years we get people who, talked to football committee chairs in the past, and I felt like they didn't understand how the process worked.
Yeah.
And that was disappointing because they're in charge of how the process works. So in that case, you're thankful for a liaison like J.P. Williams who really knows how the process works and can figure those sorts of things out. So yeah, obviously, disappointing that Megan Wilson will be not the chair next year. I DM'd her on Twitter and said, she is welcome to join the football committee if she can get on the football committee. I think she'd be a great ad over there, and that sort of thing.
Are they going to be able to handle someone who thinks that way?
First off, I think absolutely. It's an interesting committee over there. I won't say anymore. But I thought they've done a very good job. You got a straight answer about why Wartburg is in the field. And no one that I can remember has ever given a straight answer as to why Team 64 got in the field.
The only one I can think of is Mike DeWitt.
Yeah.
He might have
Mike
been the
was
only
good.
one who came close if he did or didn't. I know he gave us last in, last out. But no, you're right. She flat out gave us, here's why we did it. And I think that's, listen, to some degree, I don't see a problem with saying that. I don't know why some committee members hide that.
Right. There really shouldn't be. I mean, all of the information is out there for us. We first off, like we said earlier in the show, we knew Wartburg was 1-6 against regionally ranked opponents. That was the weak spot in the resume. And the fact that one of the wins was against the number 2 in the region was apparently all it took. I mean, Dave, they played that number 2 team in the region, Loris, 3 times. And they only beat them once. But I guess that was enough. That we would have our committee would have done it differently and did do it differently.
Yeah, and listen, every year could be different. I mean, next year Wartburg might not make it, and Megan may still be sitting on that committee, just not as a chair.
Right.
And who knows? And again, it depends on the resumes that are also at the table with them. There's so many factors that change on a yearly basis, which is why getting 20 for 20 is not the easiest thing in the world, because even if we knew the process cold, the resumes are always different.
The men's committee was done at 7?
Yeah, 7:45, something. Yeah, right? Like, what?
Wow.
I think the last time I remember a committee getting done at a reasonable time was maybe Jeff Burns' committee, and it wasn't 7 o'clock.
Wow.
Yeah, that's...
And that's
by the
when
way,
people play in their championship games at 4 o'clock on Sunday, for goodness sakes.
it also gets to the point of, okay, so send that to the production team so they can start working on it. Just a thought. So the other conversation that came up there was the idea of where's the next evolution. Megan just flat out said it. She doesn't think this is, I don't want to say she doesn't think it's the right thing, but she definitely, I think, feels that it's time to evolve. And she's brought up pairwise. Sarah gave us some more information on that. Listen, I don't know enough about pairwise to give a judgment here, but I am curious.
No, not necessarily. Obviously, the hockey people love it quite a bit. Pairwise seems to do really well with hockey. Hockey, of course, is a sport, at least at the Division III level, where there just aren't a lot of teams, right?
No.
There's very few teams. They're actually not super interconnected. There's a big island of East teams. There's a big island of quote unquote West teams, which are really the teams around my part of the country. There's like 2 schools in like Michigan and Indiana to bridge the gap. That there's not a lot of interplay. But the thing that we can do, as was alluded to, as Michelle Morgan alluded to on our football podcast a couple weeks ago, the AD at John Carroll, she said, what you do is you need to model it. You need to take previous year's data, run through it, see what you get. And to me, hearing that it basically came up with the same solution, I think that's a positive. I don't think that's a negative. I don't think that makes it a wash. Think of all the work, Dave, that this committee did to get to this point, right? I think women's basketball, especially, but men's basketball has also evolved quite a bit to get here, and to have a system where it's maybe made a little bit easier for them would certainly be helpful.
I think I'd rather see it over a course of years, and let me see what the median is, because 1 year, I don't know if that meant it just it's got the same flaws that we didn't like or something, or if we see that it gets them almost every single year right, and because every single year has fluctuations in how they're ruling it, then yeah, I'm all for it.
Yeah, exactly right. Oh shoot, let's see.
By the way, there's 84 men's ice hockey teams, 72 women's ice hockey teams, so a much smaller idea of
and 60 Division I men's ice hockey teams.
Right.
Yeah, it is ranked by a point total. It uses a team's RPI. It uses head-to-head wins between the teams if they are available. It uses common opponents, and then it creates a ranking between those two teams. And then you could do it for all 60 men's ice hockey teams at D1. Or what would we do if we went from Randolph-Macon to, I don't know, Finlandia or wherever it is at the bottom of Division III men's basketball? That'd be very interesting to see what it can do, what it might do with all of that data, because there's a lot of data. But even in men's, we talked about hockey being weird. Men's basketball, Division III basketball in general, there's not a lot of interconnected play either. So come to Las Vegas and play in the D3Hoops.com Classic and get yourself some inter-regional matchups that'll help you there.
Absolutely.
I would be interested to see how that goes, and I hope that they would make some of those mock runs public or accessible to people.
Transparency, man. The more we can have, the better. I listen. We can talk about other committees that just aren't transparent. It only helps you, and I think in this case we want to understand how the system, if you evolve to that system, and according to Sarah, sounds like Champs Committee is all gung ho about it. If it's going to be that system, so be it. But tell us how it works, why it works. Show us the data behind it, other than just 1 year. Give us a sense. All right, let's go. I'm all on board. I think because, listen, we jumped right into QOWI because we thought it was a much better system, and then we realized after the fact, this isn't as great as we thought it was.
QOWI gave us some information. QOWI came about because we didn't really have a computer system that could help the committee do big math on the fly. And so what they did was they assigned a point total to a value to each game, depending on what the opponent's record was, whether it was a win or loss, whether it was home, away, or neutral. And that was something that could be done. Before we went to the pool system, they modeled the pool system. I was sitting at the 1999 Final Four in Salem and watching the committee on Thursday afternoon while teams are practicing, working with this big map, literally a map of the United States attached to a piece of cardboard or poster board, and they had pins in it and everything. And I asked them what they were doing. It's like, this is what the next thing is going to be. And this was the pool system. It was going to be, no longer tied to 6 teams from each region going to the playoffs. The at-large bids would be allocated nationally. And that was a crazy thing to talk about in 1999. But they modeled it, and they eventually made it work. Maybe not so well the first couple of years, but they got there. Change is good. I for one am all for more math and less smoke-filled room. So,
that's true. Megan Wilson tweeted at us. She's still listening to the show. Hi, Megan.
Hello, Megan.
One of the concerns with Pairwise is the number of teams, which is why we would need to see the data for sports like basketball. Committees wanted to see what that would look like. I agree. And again,
and then that's
over a course of several years, maybe, to see what the pattern is.
I would agree with you there. The nice thing about basketball is that we have 25 contests, 26, 27, and we often have multiple contests between teams. I think that probably helps us with this sort of thing.
That's a good point.
So then to go see it with something like baseball, which we deal with about 380 teams and 40 games, and you're often playing a team at least twice, sometimes 4 times, sometimes more. And then football is 240 schools or 230 because the NESCAC wouldn't even register in Pairwise, I don't think. And then, they're only playing, teams are only playing 10 games. What does it do with that? There is a wide range of things that it wants to be applied to, and then we need to go see what it actually does. So, Megan, I understand that you're listening, and I appreciate that. When you see those, those studies of previous years' brackets, please feel free to send some our way, because we'd be interested in looking at that as well.
Yeah, we'd love to see that. By the way, what was the other thing I spotted? Oh shoot, I lost it. Where was it? There was something about soccer is kind of that hybrid. You've got kind of the basketball idea of a lot of games, but you have kind of the football mentality, but some conferences don't play twice, some do. So you get a nice mix there. So you literally have a couple of them there in generality that could give you a lot of variety of information to see how on target that is. And obviously we could go through lacrosse and volleyball and all those, but those are the ones we know that would give good data back on whether
right.
it's
I think
accurate.
if you can find something that works for the sports that are fully, incorporated across Division III, that's men's and women's basketball, that's women's volleyball, that sort of thing. Most of the soccer's generally widely adopted. And then you can also make it work for ice hockey and football and some of the things that are completely different sports with different types of schedule.
Yeah.
I mean, that's your magic bullet. That's your unicorn. We've been talking about unicorns.
Not to beat the dead horse, but more than 1 year. Because I keep hearing that, they ran the last year's data. And Sarah's not the only one who I've heard said that.
Right.
And it came
Michelle
back great.
Morgan,
Okay,
Michelle
give me
Morgan
5
on her
years.
football show said you got to run multiple years. We agree with that.
You got to have 5. I'm making a number up, but you got to have multiple years to see if it's a pattern that holds. But listen, if that's where we evolve, that's where we evolve. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, and we'll see how it all plays out. But I think it's an interesting conversation to be had. Overall, though, Pat, I mean, this is 2 pretty good brackets, and we're quibbling over. Maybe the men's side's a little bit more of a bigger conversation, but in the grand scheme of things, we're quibbling over 1 pick. The men's side, the bar was pretty high. On the women's side, they had a lot of good teams, and we've got some pretty good brackets.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an amazing tournament. I think especially the men's tournament, we have talked all year about how much parity there is across Division III men's basketball. Randolph-Macon is now unanimous number 1. They've been creeping up over the course of the past several weeks from, 6 number 1 votes to 10 to 11, now 25. But
I mean, look what they've
Randolph-Macon beatable? Randolph-Macon's beatable, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
They're, so it could be all sorts of things. It could be one of those years where, the team that wins it all comes from, number 15 or further down. I think it'd be very interesting to see how this particular bracket turns out. And, I think in women's basketball too, the depth in women's basketball probably has never been greater than it is right now. Maybe we don't have quite as many people taking COVID, years right now in women's basketball than we do in some other sports, but those opportunities are still there. There's more depth on these teams, and there's more depth on other teams. I'd be very interested to see how that bracket plays out, because so often, Dave, you and I know, that bracket is often just chalk, 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 chalk. And I don't necessarily see that playing out that way this year. And I think it'll be fun to see what actually does happen.
No, I do. I agree. I think that, it's a lot of chalk sometimes on the women's side, which we end up with some bonkers good games late in the tournament. But I do think we're going to see a few more upsets this time around, because I think it's interesting because there's more parity, there's more depth at the top, even though some of the numbers in women's basketball are shrinking. It's an interesting dichotomy between the two. And on the men's side, yes, Randolph-Macon, the fact they have not lost in conference since December, I think, of 2020 is bonkers to me. And on top of the fact, I don't think they're infallible. I think they can get to the Final Four, absolutely. But if they're not there, am I going to be surprised? No. Don't ask me who I think's getting to the Final Four, because the amount of ball bounces that are going to determine that is mind-blowing to me. By the way, another one that's crazy. Christopher Newport's lost 1 game since December 2019 on the women's side.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
And then the fact that Hope lost more this season than they had the previous 3 combined. I mean, there's some fascinating stats out there when you dive into this tournament. And again, anything's possible. Trinity, Texas knocked off Christopher Newport last season in a surprising game. I think what's more interesting is the fact we have no Amherst in the tournament this year.
Neither Amhersts.
Neither. Yeah, neither of them are there. I'm sure GP Gramacki does not know what to do with himself right now. He's got a little bit of time on his hand that he's not familiar with.
He's recruiting the bedaggles out of anything right now,
No,
right?
that's probably what he's doing. You're right.
He's got 2 to 3 extra weeks. He's at whatever. I don't know. It's maybe too soon for like AAU camps in California or whatever. But
no, that's a great point. We also have UAA's returned to the mix in both men and women. Remember, women last year only had 1 UAA team. They've got 3 now. The men have 5.
Yeah. Yep, more than half the league. One of the things we never talked about, and it's not part of the criteria, obviously, but U of R was sub 500 in conference play.
Yeah. Oh, there's plenty on Twitter who'd like to point that out to us.
Oh, I know. I get that. I
know.
was surprised. Oh, let me say one more thing. I was surprised at how much our committee chairs are reading Twitter today. They saw comments on things that I didn't even see.
I didn't see either.
I mean, but there is there's a lot of volume on Twitter about sports, and this is a big day for that. So I get it.
And there's definitely things that slide by. Even if I've got a whole tweet deck open up here, I'll admit, even at one point today, I went, "Oh God, I got to turn this off." Just too much going on. And you have nothing near you, which is another kind of oddity. You pointed that out earlier. I'm just so used to you having a game in your backyard. Do you have any thoughts on if you go anywhere this weekend? Or are you going to sit back and enjoy the fact you've got staggered starts across both genders to enjoy?
Staggered starts, man. I'm loving it.
That's awesome.
Trying to decide whether I just set up shop downstairs where the desk is a little bigger, 2 laptops, 4 screens, basically.
You can even split the screens up.
I think it's a day to watch. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Don't tell the football people I said that. But it is, right. I mean, it's nice to have this little bit of March Madness extended to the Division III basketball family, as it has been in basketball over the past several years, and a little more formally in women's basketball as well. So I'm excited about that.
I'm going to share this without a name attributed because I think it's fun, and I hope he doesn't get angry at me, but no one's going to know since it's hidden on the screen. Here's my theory. I tried this when they were involved in things. I'll leave it at that. That way we can't narrow it down any further. With 44 AQs, and granted, numbers down to what, 42 now?
Well, it's still 40. It's still 44. 44 both sides.
Yes, okay. Sorry.
Next year, 42.
Yeah, I was getting confused with last year. In D3, they need to go to 68 games like D1 and have play-in games. Most years they'd have 8 low-end AQs in the play-in games.
Well, and so it'd be very interesting to see how D3 would handle play-in games like that. Would we indeed do that? Would we do it something where it is like last 4 at-large, last 4 AQs? I kind of, it from a pure bracket, standpoint, right? It doesn't, the way the D1 does it doesn't make sense, right? But you don't want to stick all of your Stephen F. Austins or whatever in those Tuesday night games in Dayton or whatever day of the week they get played on now. And I don't think they'd want to do that at the Division III level either. But I could see, we haven't done the math in a little while, right? So, there's been a lot of talk about football landlocked at 32 teams by rule, but the bigger brackets, I believe, are landlocked by rule also at 64. So 64 times 6.5, 416. That is what we need to have 64. To have 68, we need to have 442, which we're not at, not quite. But I mean, people are talking about. There's all sorts of conversations going on right now. People are also talking about changing this access ratio, making sure that the access ratio for at-larges is a little more equitable to the rest of it, which someone has yet to explain the math to me. I have a former committee chair, a former championships committee chair, who texted me earlier this week, and I said, we have to talk about this, but not this week. So I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Let me slide into
to learn
that
a little
combo.
bit more about that, because like that math is like football 40. So if that's another 25% of teams, then that is like basketball 80 teams or something. 80? 64 plus 16, 80.
Yeah,
80 teams would be interesting. we couldn't even do a selection show on the air. That would be like 12 hours to try to figure out 36 at-large teams. But, you know. And then
okay, now I'm all for pairwise. Just there we go. There's the list.
That's right. Here you go. Boom. Boom. Just shove it into the
Selection Sunday show is really boring.
Someone else said today, or last night, if we had an NIT in Division III men's basketball this year, what an amazing NIT it would be.
Oh my God, yeah.
Worcester, Guilford, WPI.
And again, the bar got so shifted up this year. Just jacked up so high.
Jacked up is right.
No, we would have had, fascinating development on that one. Listen, I don't know where I stand on it. Again, I'd fascinate to hear what you hear on that conversation. That's for sure. There's lots of talk around it. It's the budget, man. That's where this ultimately comes down to. But the money is coming
with the new Turner deal. The money is coming, and
hopefully the new Turner deal and the new ESPN deal.
Right, exactly. Good point. And Division III could decide to change how it allocates its funding, right? I mean, we famously only get 3.18% of the budget, but do we have to, like, it's like 75% championships.
So it's been bumped to 80 now.
Right.
That's what Luis was telling us on the marathon. It's been bumped to 80, and now everyone's okay with that, but that's because of the influx of the money, that 25 is at 20 is still okay.
I mean, so the Division III membership can always determine to change that allocation in the future as well.
Yep, exactly.
We don't have to spend that 3.18% the same way all the time.
Absolutely, right.
I would recommend to people who want to know a little bit more about selections in general to listen to D3Football.com podcast 327.
Yep.
That is so in that one. And I'm just going to say, we talked with Michelle Morgan. She was the AD at John Carroll. She used to be the co-chair of the Division III Management Council.
Yep.
So she has lots of really knowledgeable opinions about how these things work and how to get things changed. We also talked with Brad Bankston. He's the commissioner of the Old Dominion Athletic Conference. He used to be the football chair. He used to be the championships committee chair, the big championships committee chair. Yep. Very knowledgeable about such things.
Very good.
I'm rattling now. I'm sorry. I'm in show mode.
You're fine.
We have Jim Catanzaro, who's the former football committee chair, head coach at Lake Forest. And then we have Jeremy Urban, football coach at Trinity, and Shermwood, football coach at Salisbury, talking about those issues, how we fix that playoff. And then if that playoff expands, might that happen elsewhere? I think, these discussions are being had.
Yes.
And it would be certainly nice to see them come to basketball, too. We could always use more teams in the basketball tournament. Say everybody at Guilford and Worcester and Rockport and Claremont or Mudd or Scripps or Colby, possibly even Sawyer. Let's be honest.
By the way, for those of the inside who understand what I'm about to say, D3 Ticker took notice of that podcast and gave it good billing on it as well. I definitely look forward to going back and listening to that. And to that point of Brad Banks, I mean, the conversation we had a year and a half ago, well, it was less than that, but ahead of the NCAA convention where all the changes were taking place. Brad's knowledgeable. The Barry's AD was terrific. DePauw's
you had
athletic.
DePauw's AD also, right?
They have. There's some people in Division III who are very well plugged in and understand the nuances. And I highly encourage anybody who is not as plugged in to get that way, because I think it changes the conversation. It changes the scope of things. It helps people understand things a little bit better. And especially administrators in Division III, I think you can get a whole nother understanding of what's really at play on the larger play than just that little focus that you think you've got. I've learned so much from those types of individuals, and look forward to listening to your podcast. And I am sure we have talked about doing a D3 kind of podcast that revolves around that on a general scale often.
Yeah,
I would love to dive into that.
Crossover.
Yeah, I'd love to dive a crossover, absolutely. But I'd love to do a podcast once a month, if it were, or whatever it was, where we dive into those topics, because we don't have enough time on Hoopsville, and you've got to dedicate a whole show on football to it. There's a place for that, and it's not for the thousands and thousands of fans. But if you do want to dive in we'll have an episode on something that might interest you, because there is enough of that stuff going on that I think is worth talking about, because as you said, it's going to end up driving the ship somewhere. Every time football is discussed at the convention, every single time football is discussed at the convention about anything football has, you have non-football schools who feel they have to vote in case football comes to them, or they don't want it to impact something else. The tentacles are mind-blowing sometimes. And I think it's a fascinating, one thing leads to another all the time.
Can I take a very small tangent into maybe one last topic or one more topic?
Sure.
I don't know, that was like a pregnant pause there, but I'm sure it's just the latency on the Zoom call. One of the conversations that you had, primarily you, but a little bit me, on Twitter also today, was with Jason Pruitt, the head women's basketball coach at the University of Laverne, right?
We had a very quick call, too.
Okay, good. Excellent. I'm glad
he wanted to make sure the phone worked, mainly.
I'm glad that manifested into something
absolutely.
more.
And,
well,
he knows what we're talking about.
Yeah, right. So here's the thing, right? I mean, someone who is in the position of being on the table or near the table or hoping for an at-large bid for the first time may not understand how this stuff works. And, Dave, we have heard from so many coaches who have, had an idea of how they need to schedule and then later have joined an NCAA committee and had the wool pulling off of their eyes, right?
Oh,
and all of a sudden realize, oh my God, I'm not doing anything right here. I can only think that, regardless of how you feel about Rochester's resume,
right?
Luke Flakertsy's been on the committee for a while and knows how to schedule and went out.
Sarah basically said that.
I know. Yes, she absolutely did say that. He understands how the system works and played to it. And I don't think gamed the system, just, got his team in a position where they could create the gaudiest strength of schedule you could ever see in men's basketball. Oh, and yes, let's get rid of the multiplier. You mentioned that too, way back ago.
It's one I want to have a conversation with some people about, yeah.
Multiplier doesn't help us in men's basketball. The numbers are quite different in women's basketball.
On the men's side, it had a purpose. I don't know if it has that purpose anymore. I don't think we're having the problem we were having when it was put in place.
I think you're probably right. I don't know that it actually did what we wanted it to do math-wise, but it did probably help change people's behaviors.
Yes.
Regardless of whether the math worked ever or not.
Yes, that part there. Yes, it was the behavioral part, more importantly in my mind. Granted, retiring helps too. I'll let that.
I don't know what you're talking about, big dog. I think you're way off the ranch here.
Well done, sir. Well done.
Thank you.
No, again, I think there's fascinating conversations, and I'm going to be selfish. Donate now, and if we ever start a campaign where we say we're going to be putting this podcast together, if you want to sign up, because then that will breed what we can do more of, and I think there's a place for it, and I think it's fascinating for some of us out there.
I think so too. It'd be a very industry heavy podcast. It'd be like a trade newspaper podcast for D3, but I think there would be an audience for it. It's probably not. It may not be 4 figures, but it'd be a few hundred very important people. So I would consider that successful.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think we'll brainstorm. On that note, I think I don't have anything else. I'm ready to tap out. It's later than I thought it was, but mainly it's been a few days, and I know I haven't done some of the heavy lifting that others have done, but I know I am taxed. By the way, hats off to Brendan Gulick too for his hard work on the shows. He did some heavy lifting there.
I got a DM from one of the people who we kind of let in behind the curtain over the course of the past couple of days, and I didn't get permission to use this person's comments, so I'll leave it vague as to who it was. But
I did that earlier. Go ahead, sir.
Who basically said, I had no idea what goes on behind the scenes to put D3 hoops out the door basically on a weekend like that. And yeah, there are so many moving parts that are going on. It's like we're doing all these things that we did all championship weekend, and then we'll have a bunch of more stuff coming for people this week. Just know that we got Dave is very much public face of Division III basketball right now. There are a bunch of other people doing a lot of work also to help make this stuff happen. And we'll have people plugging in scores as well coming up this weekend. So it is it's an all hands on deck kind of a situation. And we have our football around the nation guy was coming in and giving us tips this week about stuff that had been released, et cetera, et cetera. It's again, the second most wonderful time of the year.
No, I agree. Yeah, second most, sir? Really? How did we downgrade that quickly? Are you that paranoid about your fan base?
I just remembered that Christmas also happens at the same time.
Oh, okay. So. I'll give you that. Well, thanks for the time. I don't know if you want to use that as your final word, but we always give the guests the final word, as you know.
So we do. Come to d3hoops.com and tell all your friends to come to d3hoops.com this week. And if you're a sports information director, get your all-region and nominations in before we all forget.
That's a great one. And by the way, the new top 25s came out, as you pointed out, on the men's side. Has the women's come out?
The women's did come out.
Yeah, I thought so. No changes there, though.
Top 25. We go into the tournament with CNU with 18 number one votes, Transy with 6, and Scranton with 1. And so
I'm a little surprised Smith hasn't gotten more love.
Good point. There were 3 number one votes that switched to CNU from Transy this week. Smith, a very solid number 4. Actually, let me switch back to the proper screen. They're 15 points ahead of Trinity of Texas. So
yeah, it's tight. By the way, 4 new teams in the top 25, new in the sense that they weren't there last week. On the men's side, North Park jumped in at 19, Carrollton at 21, Rowan at 22, and East Texas Baptist jumped in at 24. So Carrollton. Did I say Carrollton, didn't I? I apologize.
You did say that's new Carrollton, and this is old Carrollton.
Yep. Nope. Totally flipped on that one accidentally. But Carrollton, well, it's not as bad as
the class of 23 to Carrollton is magic. Class of 1923 won their 3rd consecutive MIEC title. Now the class of 2023 is going to the NCAA tournament.
I want to thank you for that note. That was a fun one to blab on the air today. All right, sir. Take care of yourself. Thanks so much. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Get some rest.
Yes. Pat Coleman from D3Hoops.com. Go to D3Hoops.com. We'll have all the links. We'll have everything ready to go for the NCAA tournament. Now that we got these staggered starts, it's going to be absolutely awesome. There, you can get plenty of information to go along the way. Please take advantage of D3Hoops.com. The top 25 polls are out. Macon is the number 1 unanimous top 25 team. Christopher Newport moved into 2nd. Mount Union moved into 3rd. St. Joseph's fell down to 4th. Keene State stayed at 5th. Oswego up to 6th. Swarthmore jumped to 7th. Case Western jumped to 8th. Wheaton fell to 9th. John Carroll fell down 2 spots to 10th. Hopkins fell 4 to 11. Oshkosh fell 1 to 12. That's probably just I even had trouble with them as a voting team. Guilford stayed at 13, though they're not in the tournament, as we have discussed. Williams fell down to 14th. St. Thomas fell to 15th. Middlebury moved up to 16th. Mary Hardin Baylor stayed at 17. Wash U jumped up to 18th. North Park in the poll at 19. Hampton Sydney stayed at 20. Carleton into the poll at 21. Rowan in at 22. Calvin fell from 16 to 23. East Texas Baptist into the poll at 24. Pomona Pitzer fell a spot to 25th. Claremont Mud Scripps fell out. WPI fell out. Barry fell out. Trine fell out. On the women's side, the new ones were Tufts at 21. Berea at 25. Puget Sound and W&J fell out. We'll be on the air Thursday with our NCAA selection show, or our preview show. Basically, we'll get a bunch of schools on the program to talk about their upcoming games in the NCAA tournament. I've got an opportunity. It looks like I will be at a local site getting to work an NCAA tournament game. Very excited about that. It's been a while since I've been behind the mic. In that sense, I'll look forward to that. When we all nail it down, I will tweet that information out, but I'm looking forward to it very much so. Actually, disappointed my son. He came up, he goes, "Oh, is Randolph Macon hosting?" I said, "They are." He goes, "Good, can we go back?" He came with me last year to the opening round. I said, "Nope, we can't." He goes, "Why?" I said, "Because." I think now he's excited about that idea. We'll see. I'll see if I can get him in. But folks, enjoy it. This is a great time of year. We can quibble, we can complain, we can be upset, and we can be frustrated about a team didn't get in and a team didn't get placed where they should, and whatever the case may be. And listen, on the men's side, there are some darn good teams that didn't make the NCAA tournament this year. Blame all those who couldn't get the job done. But more importantly, this is still going to be a lot of fun. So enjoy it, and make sure you stay out with D3Hoops.com. Hashtag D3Hoops on your social medias. Stay with us at D3 Hoopsville as well. along the way. Appreciate all of you who joined us on YouTube and on Facebook live streaming. A lot of conversations there. Appreciate it. Couldn't get to all of you. I apologize for that, but I appreciate it nonetheless. And of course, shout out to my Aunt BJ, who always tunes in. We appreciate it. We now turn that into a thing where we give her a shout out when we get the opportunity. Thanks to our committee chairs, Megan Wilson and Sarah Quadracki, for joining us on the show to answer our crazy questions on our sleep-deprived minds. Thanks to Bob Quillman, Riley Zayas, Scott Peterson, and Pat Coleman for joining us as well to talk about everything that we saw today. And again, shout out to Brendan Gulick for all the good work he did today as well. With that, we sign off. We'll see you back here Thursday to talk about the NCAA tournaments. Who's in? We know. Who's going to advance? We don't. And we'll talk all about who we think might get there. You've been listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com and Sport Tours International, along with the Women's Basketball Coaches Association and the National Association of Basketball Coaches. We appreciate all their support, along with yours, who have donated to our cause. We appreciate that very much. Look forward to closing that gap to the actual goal by hopefully by the end of the season, but maybe by the end of the week coming up. Thanks. Take care. We'll talk soon.